Welcome to the Hawkzone Rundown, your ultimate podcast for Seattle Seahawks football. I'm Ryan. This is Bryce. We're supposed to have Dan Viens coming in. Here he is. He's coming in
Sorry,
right
guys.
now. He's back. So we have Dan Viens. We're excited, guys. This is a live training camp preview crossover, right? We have Dan, and joining us too in a few minutes' time is going to be Michael Thompson as well. He writes for the Field Goals. So we're pumped, guys. Get all your questions and comments in. We're going to be doing Q&As as a live show. We're going to get into everything, camp battles. Dan's going to be down there at training camp, so he's going to get firsthand with the guys down there. I mean, it's going to be a great time, exciting time for everybody because we're about to play football, guys. We're getting down to it. Just every off season feels like it's long because you get to this point and everyone's just itching to play ball. So we're going to break it all down with the guys on the other side. Before that, guys, make sure you go down, subscribe to the channel, share the videos, like the videos, all that. You can also go buy us a coffee too. It's another great way to support the channel. So we're going to get into everything training camp on the other side.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about me.
Yeah, let's go. It's go time, baby.
Here comes Gino. Steps up, takes that shot to the end zone. It is Metcalf. 20.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You about to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Off me.
Nobody in the world can do that.
Are you kidding me? Trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Jackson Smith is Jigba. The circus music rolls in. Throws it forward. Oh my goodness, he caught it. By the way,
This is the Hawkzone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Guys, welcome back to the Hawkzone Rundown training camp preview crossover show. Get your comments in, guys. We're going to get to a lot of them through the show, but joining us, we're excited and fired up to be hanging out with Dan Viens from Seahawks Forever. Dan, what's happening?
Well, let's put it this way. It's a good thing you guys can see me and not smell me. I've just spent the last 6 days driving across the United States. So, yeah, I might be a little ripe. Sorry, I didn't make myself look all pretty tonight.
Well, yeah, it's all good, man. Same with me. I'm wearing a red hat tonight, so I got a little flack before I came on air from the guys. And just clear that up, this is a minor league affiliate baseball. So everybody who's a baseball fan, check it out. So if nothing to do with the Niners or the Cardinals, guys. So let's just get that out of the way right now. But man, Dan, this is exciting, man, because we're right around the corner here from camp. And all this whole off season, it's been a busy off season. It's been an intriguing off season. Marquee guys out the door real quick with DK and Gino that we've talked about, feels like we talked about for months now. The draft, we felt like, everyone feels good about it. And this coaching staff and Mike McDonald now with a first full off season. And it really feels like it's his team now. What's your overall feel leading into camp with how this off season went?
First of all, it feels like forever ago that, Gino was traded, DK traded, all of that stuff. I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around it because we had so much news this offseason, but it feels like a lifetime ago. And you're right. I do think one of the overwhelming storylines of all throughout OTAs and into minicamp was this really is not only Mike McDonald's team, but his organization. And we're going to see him putting his stamp on it this offseason, I think. We heard lots of reports from those on the ground, watching some of the offseason workouts, that he is in complete command, that his comfort level is extremely high. There was the one practice that he called practice off for a little while and went out and kind of undressed some guys and got on them about effort and things of that nature. Whereas last year, I think, one of the storylines as we were getting ready to go into camp a year ago was, at times it almost felt awkward. Like, it's not just learning how to be a head coach and all the X's and O's that go into it. It's all the logistical stuff. And I remember very clearly last year around this time thinking that dealing with the media was something that Mike McDonald hadn't had to do a lot in his career. Think about how often we hear from Adam Dirty. They'll have planned appearances every once in a while, but what? Maybe once a month? Like, it's not a big part of the job. You don't have to be good at it. And we kind of felt some of that the first year, and some of that's just Mike Macdonald's conversation style. He's very intellectual, and sometimes he pauses and takes his time. This year, he just seems like a guy that has his finger on the pulse of everything that's going on in the organization. And we also, there's some pretty strong indications that he's being given a lot of responsibility by John Schneider and those in the organization, that he played a big role this offseason in talent evaluation and some of the decisions they made in free agency and the draft. So I can't wait to see him put it all together when the season starts.
Hey, Michael Thompson joining us. What's going on?
Not much, guys. How are you guys doing? Ready for some football start this week?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, it's gonna be great. I'm excited, man. Is it at the end of this month? We've got the Canton game. Like, within 2 weeks, we got actual. I know it's preseason, but we actually have football. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike. We were just talking about getting Dan's feeling with this overall offseason feel. A couple days away from camp here. What was your overall assessment, man? We haven't talked to you in a while, and like Dan mentions, like the stuff that happened so long ago feels like with DK and Gino at the door, and really it's kind of given Mike Macdonald kind of even more time to really create maybe what the identity is going to be. Because we were talking. I can't remember who was on the show, but we were talking about guys like DK. Maybe they weren't even in a Mike Macdonald sort of identity plan. I really feel like now the players here are Mike's guys per se. Like most of the old guys from the Pete era, especially the marquee names, are out the door. So I really think it kind of gives Mike even more reins, really, or the pressure's off. He doesn't have to worry about even the Tyler Lockett's, even though he's on the other side of 30 and all that. But they're no longer here, and now it's like you bring in the Cooper Kupps and guys like that say, hey, I need leaders here on this team. And what was your overall assessment and feeling now when we're pretty much wrapped up the offseason? We're finally ready to, well, we're still the offseason, but camp is feeling like we're going to be playing football pretty quick here. So what was your overall feel so far this offseason?
Yeah, I think it just kind of continues this transformative state of the franchise. I feel like this is kind of year 2 of this scenario happening, where last year it was basically like, hey, we're kind of giving the reins to John Schneider. I think it's very clear now that this is John Schneider's franchise, so to speak. He's running the show. And by extension of that, this is Mike Macdonald's team now. And this is year 2 of them together. I think Dan kind of nailed it. Like, I think Mike was learning how to be a head coach on the fly. Like, just kind of like what you said, and kind of going back and thinking about how awkward some of those press conferences were. And even though they were awkward, you got a lot more. Like, it kind of also goes back, like, we had a professional actor as our head coach in Pete Carroll. Like, I mean that as a compliment. Like, right. Yeah. Literally, they couldn't find a perfect person to cast as a high school or college football coach than Pete Carroll and stuff in a movie. And we kind of got, some of the Pete Carroll isms, and we're learning that with Mike Macdonald, that that's not exactly how he rolls. And same with John. This team has John's fingerprints all over it. Geno Smith is not here anymore. DK Metcalf is not here anymore. You can make a strong case that we took a major step back. And then on the flip side, someone can make a very strong case that we're taking a potentially major step forward. And that's what just makes this so exciting. I have an article I'm submitting tonight that talks about the top storylines coming up for the training camp for the Seahawks. And like, one of the big things I keep going back to is how transformative is this draft class? How transformative is Clint Kubiak with the coaching staff? Like, remember Ryan Grubb? Like, that's just like, it almost seems like we kind of forgot. And that was a guy that dominated the entire 2024 season for the Seahawks. How transformative was getting rid of Geno and DK and bringing in Grubb and bringing in, Darnold and Cooper and DeMarcus Lawrence and all these things. Like, I would say it's the most exciting offseason, even though we might be worse than we were last year. We might take a step back, but at least it's something different, right? Like, I just feel like we've kind of been in that stagnant phase since 2020. right? Maybe even 2021. And like, obviously we made a big change with Russell Wilson and a big change with Pete Carroll, but everything else really felt the same. And it feels like this is that first time where like, this feels like a very different Seahawks team. And I can't wait to go to Lumen Field this year and see how this looks. I can't wait to, watch them on TV and see how they do. Cause it just felt honestly for the last half decade, there was bad teams that we'd figure out a way to barely beat, even though we should have beaten them by a lot. And then we would randomly hang with one or two really good teams. And then when it came down to it at home, we'd get our asses handed to us in games that cost us divisions and wild card berths. And like, I'm okay with the idea of this not working out. I'm just excited to see it. I'm definitely more on that glass half full. As you guys know, I'm a big believer in what Mike is doing. I like the additions. So I'm excited to get this thing rolling and see what it looks like.
So it's kind of interesting you brought up how this really has been a change in philosophy and the way they even do business to an extent as a Seahawks. Like, I know it's not, a lot of people expect it, but the way this Noah Fant thing kind of went down, on Sunday isn't generally how the Hawks have handled business. Usually they don't cut a guy they've carried most of the way through the offseason a couple days before they go to, camp. And I know what most people believe in, and what I've heard as well is they were trying to find a trade partner, couldn't find anything for the 11th highest paid tight end in football based on the production. But that's one thing to me that I find very interesting about this team, where you look at when Pete was here, they would go to extents to try and get guys to be happy and stay and find ways for guys to work and fit in. And where we've all as fans sat there and going like, you're beating a dead horse, like move on from this individual. Now they're like almost the polar opposite in a way. And it's like, if he doesn't fit, you're out. We're going to go find someone that is going to fit. Did that kind of surprise you guys how the Noah Fant deal or release, I should say, just kind of went down, Dan, from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. The timing of it, because all offseason I have been pushing back against the idea that, hey, we should trade him, we should release him. The fans, at least what I was getting on my channel is I think the majority of fans thought that he was an expendable player and disposable, and that money could be better used elsewhere. And I was the one pushing back. And because, a number of reasons, but especially because of what you pointed out. Like the Seahawks are usually very decisive about their offseason cap cut moves. We saw it as recently as last year, where they let 5 or 6 guys go right off the bat, right? Even this year, as soon as the offseason started, Draymond Jones, gone. Tyler Lockett, gone. Last year, it was Quandre and Jamal Adams. Because not only have they already made that decision to move forward, but they want to give those guys the best opportunity they can to further their career and be available and be a free agent when teams have roster spots available and when they have cap space available. And right now, everyone's 90-man roster is full, and teams have spent money that they wanted to spend this offseason. The ones that haven't spent it have plans to roll it over because they have things coming up over the next year or two. And so it was the timing of it that really, really surprised me. And the first thing I did is tweet, I got to admit I was wrong, because I thought once they got past March and he was still on the roster, I thought it made all the sense in the world. Not just because he's still a guy who's 27, 28 years old, in the prime of his career physically, but had the athletic ability. Clint Kubiak, mentioned him by name. Kubiak's a guy that likes to use a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, so we needed good tight ends. And the other tight ends on our roster, regardless of how much as fans and content creators we like each of them, they all have question marks, right? Elijah Arroyo never played a full season healthy in college. Go look at footballreference.com and look up his college stats, and you'll be shocked how little football he actually played in college. AJ Barner, we like what he did as a rookie, but it was 1 year. And I think he exceeded everybody's expectations. Like, a lot of rookies flash as rookies and then struggle to live up to those expectations they've set for themselves. And then all the other guys, everybody gets excited about this undrafted free agent or that. They rarely make it, right? We just had another example today of a guy that a bunch of people had on the roster as an undrafted free agent, Zy Alexander, a guy that might make the team, no longer on the roster anymore. So there's a lot of uncertainty in that tight end room. And frankly, I'm a little bit nervous about it today without Fant being there. But clearly what I believe happened, and you touched on it already, is I do think I think that two things. One is they wanted to make sure that they exhausted every opportunity they can to get some value in return for him. It wasn't going to be easy to trade him before the draft because it was such a deep tight end draft. But then you wait, hoping that maybe there's an injury, maybe a team doesn't like what they have, or they didn't get into what they wanted to, it didn't get out what they wanted to from the draft. And there was obviously no takers, not at that salary. That's a huge, huge point, right? Maybe the Miami Dolphins would have made the most sense. They were able to get Darren Waller to come out of retirement for $2 million. That's a lot less of a commitment than Noah Fant. And so, but I think the other aspect of it is they absolutely needed to be confident that what they had was going to work. And they needed to see, I think, in particular, that Elijah Arroyo could be healthy all offseason and looked like the player that they hoped he would be, ready to contribute as a rookie. And then there's some other guys on the roster that has some flexibility, and I think that can be fun to talk about when we get into the roster construction, that it gives them some versatility. And I think now they're planning on leaning into that a little bit with Brady Russell and Robbie Utes.
Mike, what were your thoughts on it, just to close this out?
Yeah, I mean, respect. I think I was kind of with the fans and not on the same side as Dan, where I was excited to see something else. I was hopeful to, get out of that contract, and say what you will. Like, I don't think it's a contract that's destroyed, our offseason or anything like that, but it definitely was a number that caught me by surprise when we first extended him and stuff. And just, again, like, man, what a talented looking player. And it just, for whatever reason, in Denver and here in Seattle, there would be some wow plays. I know the Seahawks on social media said thank you for the countless memories. I think I could probably count on one, maybe two hands, the memories, but like, just a very talented player. Wish it could have worked out. It just, again, makes me wonder, what was Noah Fant's side of this? Like, was he kind of realizing that maybe he was getting passed up? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out this whole thing where maybe he didn't want to be there, which again would be kind of weird with the money and stuff. But I keep going back to what Joe Buck and Troy Aikman said when we played the Lions on Monday Night Football. And it was literally, it felt like the game that Barner was like, oh, okay, this guy might actually be a pretty decent number 2 tight end. And they even said that Mike McDonald told them that he thinks that Barner is going to be a star. Like, not just like a good player. He said he's going to be a star. And I just remember that caught me off guard so much. And then I think in the second half, he caught a touchdown. And I think Barner showed a lot last year in limited opportunities in an offense that was just absolutely messed up from about day one under Grubb. And so it might just be something that, honestly, he's just completely passed by Fant. We don't know what Fant looks like. But Dan does make a good point. Like, cool, you're hoping a second-year tight end that has historically been a number 2 tight end ever since high school, or going back to high school, has been a number 2 tight end, and then Arroyo, who has not proven to be able to stay on the field and looked really good when he had the number 1 pick throwing the ball to him. Like, how does that translate to 17 games on an offense that wants to, I assume, play the Shanahan-Kubiak scheme, which is run the ball, run the ball, run the ball? And Barner's a good blocking tight end, but like, nobody's going to say Arroyo is necessarily that type of player. And who's our third tight end? Is it Saubert? Is that how you say his name?
Eric Saubert, yeah.
Yeah, Saubert and stuff. And maybe that's just something that they just believe in him. And then there's also the exciting, other side of this story, which I do think that is what this is. I just think it's just not, the fit and the match probably just isn't there anymore, and they want to give him a chance. And so they're making that decision now instead of trying to make it work. I also do wonder, it does clear up a lot of space. And as Dan pointed out, there are a lot of teams that are rolling stuff over for next year because it is, even with all the extensions that we're getting, it is still an absolutely loaded, like, historic free agent class coming up. I do wonder, though, like, does this open the door for a trade? And I would say happy anniversary, 5-year anniversary this week from the Jamal Adams trade, right? I think it was July 25th, 2020. We had that trade. I remember exactly where I was. I was like, oh, sweet. We just became a defensive powerhouse. And
Yeah.
it didn't exactly work out after the first year and stuff. But, John's typically that kind of guy that probably thinks the team's closer than maybe us 4 right now would think we are to whatever that goal is, which I think for all of us is to be a Super Bowl contender and taking the right healthy path to get there. But if an opportunity presents itself, and you guys know what players I'm talking about that are potentially available or not, like we'll see. But it does create that opportunity and that flexibility. It might not even be a defensive edge guy like a Trey Hendrickson. It might be an offensive guy that might present itself and be available. I don't know. It's very interesting to see. And it is a not insignificant amount of money. So it opens a lot of doors, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing too. For those, and I'm seeing a little bit of it in the comments, but I know I've gotten it directly since the move was made yesterday, even though I was on the road. A lot of I told you so's, a lot of he was never going to be in the plans. He was never, the timing would disagree with that. But also this, a couple of days ago, I was looking for new wallpapers for my phone. Okay, bear with me for a second, right? You'll see where I'm going with this. And I was looking on the Seahawks official website. They put wallpapers up all the time. The schedule, different players. They had so much Noah Fant stuff that was new, like now, 2025. They don't do those things lightly, right? They communicate. They communicate with their PR department, with the media relations department, everything else. If they knew that the chances of hanging on to Noah Fant were slim and that they were just doing so hoping to find some sort of market for him, they wouldn't go to the lengths to do that kind of stuff. I do think this was a change in direction for them. And where at the beginning of the offseason, they thought, this is a guy that we know exactly what he is and we know how he can fit into this offense. And there's some question marks about the rest of the room. They feel better about those questions now, and it gave them the flexibility to release Fant without any impending ideas that money's not earmarked for anything. It's nice to have. They've already cut into, remember a couple of months ago, we were talking about how they had $120 million in cap space for 2026. Not the case anymore. It's about 50. They've already eaten into some of that. They're going to eat into it more when they start extending guys. And so, they might not do anything dramatic with this movie or with this money other than have it there in case there's something available at the trade deadline, but also rolling it over to next year when there's some real heavy lifting to be done.
Do you think it was a matter?
Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, I just wanted to ask Dan. Do you think it was just a matter of, he's been in this building for so long now that the Seahawks were just like, look, we got these two promising young guys. We already know Fant's ceiling. We want to just free up a roster spot and let these young guys play, and sink or swim. We believe in these guys. Arroyo obviously hasn't suited up yet, but they obviously like him.
Right.
Do you think it was more of a case than not just the money? Obviously, they're saving a couple bucks, but more that, look, we know what we got in this guy. We don't want to run it back with him anymore. I mean, do you think that was the thinking going into the offseason, and then when OTA's kicking in and they kind of see what the guys are doing, the young dudes are just like, yeah, he's just become more expendable.
Yeah, I think they needed to see what they had on hand. And once I think that it's a statement that they feel good about those guys that are on hand. And so they were able to make this move. Also, we don't always have all the information in the moment. We may very well find out later, Noah Fant might have gone to them and said, hey, I don't really see an opportunity here. It looks like you guys are trending in this direction with the tight ends. I'd like to be released, right? That's not something that the Seahawks are necessarily going to come out and tell us right off the bat. We may find that out later. It is, look, I'm seeing some comments. It is unusual that they do it this way. And that's why there's some uncertainty. None of us know exactly what they're intending to do. I think the primary factor is that through OTAs and minicamp, heading into training camp, they just feel good about the rest of that room. And it gave them the flexibility to make this move.
And I think the interesting part about that, not to keep dragging on about the tight ends, is you can do a lot worse in the NFL than Noah Fant in 2025. That's a fine. If you told me he was the starting tight end on a playoff team, I would be like, yeah, I could see that. I believe it. Right. And so it's very interesting for me to see that Clint Kubiak had to be a big part of this decision, right? He's running the offense. If he believes so strongly in Barner and Arroyo, which, as we all know, we've grown up watching Clint's dad and in the Niners as well, in the Shanahan era with their tight ends. That's just a very easy feed and let them go. That's the tight ends are always successful in that offense. And for him to feel, and for John and Mike, and for that trio to feel strong enough about Barner and just getting Arroyo in here and getting that contract figured out, like, I think it's kind of interesting and kind of exciting and kind of a scary way. Like Dan was saying, it definitely, you're taking a risk without that veteran presence, but it must mean that Clint sees something or really does believe, no, I can cook with Barner and Arroyo and the trio of the other guys that we got there. And so I'm excited to see how that plays out, because that should be, like, not to make this a fantasy football thing, but like typically that is a position with under that scheme that does pretty well. And now we got two young, exciting guys that have shown a little, and then one has shown nothing. And it's kind of like, all right, here you go, sink or swim.
I'll say that last thing about Noah Fant. I don't think it moves the needle at all. I don't think it changes my opinion at all about how good or not this team might be. I think if he had made this team and been on this roster, I probably would have felt the same way, that, while we're all still waiting for him to kind of have that breakout year that we think his athletic ability suggests he should be able to have, I don't think it would have broken any of our hearts, and might have even been, if he had been cut at the cut down to 53, I think all of our reaction would have been, well, they like the other guys. It's just the fact that it happened 2 days before training camp starts shines a spotlight on it, makes it a little bit unusual, but it doesn't change my opinion at all about what I think this offense can be.
So I'm going to throw this up on the screen, guys. Mookie Alexander chimed in here with an interesting statement. He goes, the Seahawks only have 3 players with a 2025 cap hit north of $10 million now. Yeah. Leonard Williams, Sam Darnold, and Chenna. So that's another interesting fact in this whole thing, is really they don't have a lot of high earners on this team currently anymore. And Chenna's another guy that I think if he struggles to stay healthy won't potentially, be here going forward. The other thing I'm going to say, just on another side topic, guys, if you're in the chats and comments, make sure these comments are directed towards the conversation we're having and not taking shots at individuals. If you do that, you will be removed. I'm putting that out there right now. I will not repeat it again. Keep the content in the comments towards the Seattle Seahawks and football, and keep them professional. So let's move on to the next thing here, guys.
Say something about my hat? I was
no, nothing about your hat, Ryan. Don't worry, nothing about your hat. But let's go with this, guys. What are still the biggest remaining questions about this team going into training camp for you, Mike? What's one of the big ones that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I think obviously one of the biggest things for me is, can this free agency group bring some consistency and stability to this offense and defense in the areas that they've been weak? Like defensively, I mean, I still get nightmares of the Green Bay Sunday Night Football game. I still get nightmares of the Buffalo game, where these guys just ran down our throats and we couldn't stop them to save our lives. And like literally like that, obviously a few other games were mistakes there, but like kind of forget, like as disappointing and as frustrating as last season was to watch, we're one game away, one of those Ram games away from going to the playoffs, right? And win the division. And so seeing DeMarcus Lawrence, even at age 33, 34, if he can come in and just really set the edge, like literally and figuratively, of like, hey, like we are going to shut down this running problem. Like I can't wait to see what Mike can do in year 2 with the defense. We saw what he did in Baltimore. I think the defense is very primed to have a big top 10 defensive season, especially with the schedule that we have on paper. It looks like a great opportunity for us to have like a truly contender level defense right away. And then obviously like on the offensive side, it's not just, I mean, yeah, it's a free agent addition, but also like bringing in Clint Kubiak, right? Getting him to not, go somewhere else. I think that's a big addition. I've always been huge on the Kubiak Shanahan stuff. I love it. I think it might be a little bit like predictable in certain areas, but the execution is there. The philosophy is pretty sound for if you want to have a successful offense, like a top 10, top 12 offense, which is all we really needed last year out of this team. And we would have, again, like I said, been division champs. So having Clint come in and then the familiarity with a new quarterback in Sam, I think Sam, it's definitely, it feels like it could be a big like risk. I personally don't feel that way. I think that there's a good chance he brings more stability at the quarterback position in the key areas that we struggled last year with. Third down, pressure, red zone. Those are 3 areas that we just really, honestly, we shit the bed in when it mattered most. And I'm a big Geno Smith fan, but like he did not come up big in those spots. And then obviously then finishing up with Cooper Kupp, what does he have in the tank? Like this is going to be super exciting. the prodigal son returns, right? The pride of Yakima. That's cool. We're probably not getting the 2021 should have been MVP version of Cooper Kupp, but that doesn't mean he still can't be a very valuable number 2 receiver for JSN. And so, like, I just think that's where I'm at, is like, I'm ready to see this defense become elite, and then can the offense become like wild card good. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there in January hosting a playoff game. That's like kind of where I'm wondering if that can come together. And obviously there's a lot of ifs. Age with DeMarcus Lawrence, age and health with Cooper Kupp. Was Sam Darnold in the perfect scheme at the perfect time, at the perfect moment to be successful for 16 games? Are we getting that version of Sam Darnold, or are we getting the last 2 games of last year, Sam Darnold? Those are the big things that I think will decide this season. Like, that's my biggest question, is what does this offensive look like? Because it was an absolute train wreck last year, and it really didn't have to be that way.
Dan, what about for yourself? What are your biggest questions?
I'll just piggyback off of what Michael was saying, and I'll leave some of the low-hanging fruit and the easy ones for the rest of y'all, because the first place I always go to when you think about biggest questions, I always think about positional battles and what the rotations are going to look like. But for me, I think the biggest big picture one is, how long is it going to take the offense to come together? I have been saying all offseason, I've been consistent on this point. I am really, really bullish and positive about the changes they made in the coaching staff, the philosophical changes, the commitment to this scheme, and then going out and getting the best coaches that are available on the market that were free agents that know each other, that have been coaching the scheme for decades, and in many cases have been working together coaching the scheme, and they know how each other, they know their language and everything else, and bringing that philosophy in, and then going out and trying to acquire players that will fit into it. But how long is that going to take, right? Is it going to gel right away? We saw that New Orleans offense last year, in the first year, the only year of Clint Kubiak calling the plays, scored 85 points the first 2 weeks combined. Granted, one of those was against Carolina Panthers, and now I can't remember who the other game was against, but it was against a solid team. They came out of the gate just swinging, right? And is that going to happen right away? It's a different animal. There's a lot more youth up front on the offensive line that you have to try to account for. But how long is that going to take? I've kind of had this idea in my head that last year we saw the rough start that the defense got off to, and then very similarly to what happened Mike McDonald's first year as defensive coordinator in Baltimore, about halfway through the season, couple of tweaks in personnel, but also just guys getting their feet underneath them and learning the scheme, it clicked. And we saw how good that defense was the rest of the season. I expect at some point this season that's going to happen with the offense, where we're all going to look at each other and go, hey, this is coming together. When's that going to be? The sooner the better, because I like how the schedule kind of lays out early in the season. But I've been saying it for 5 months. I'll say it again here. I think how far this team goes is, and I'm not saying I'm not reinventing the wheel here or saying anything, brilliant. But it's how well the offense comes together and how they look, and the quicker the better.
Yeah, I think one interesting thing that Dan brought up is, on paper, the first 2 games look a little daunting, right? Home against the 49ers. And then you go on the road for the home opener at the Steelers, which, typically those are 2 very good defenses. I would also, my only counter to that is, I think those offenses could be the worst that we see them at any point during the season, right? Like, who is Brock Purdy throwing the football to week 1? Is it like, it's a legitimate question. Like, who knows what's going on with Juwan Jennings? He has every right to want to raise right now, right? Exactly. Like, who else are you going to throw the ball to other than Kittle? We don't know what McCaffrey looks like. We know Ayuk's not going to be there. Purcell's not going to be there. Like, it's still Kyle Shanahan, but I think that's a great opportunity for the defense. I mean, that just feels like a first one to 17 or first one to get to 20 wins kind of a game. And the same thing when we go to Pittsburgh, right? Like, Aaron Rodgers we saw last year, we kicked the living crap out of him in the second half there. And there's a lot that doesn't look very exciting in Pittsburgh, and that franchise feels like it's on the brink of a full rebuild. And so throwing Aaron Rodgers into it seems like adding dynamite to your soup. I don't think that's going to work out. And so that's where I'm really interested. If the defense can hold, like what Dan was saying, this potential jump in year 2 on those 2 games, we don't have to win both, but like I think splitting those is really good and seeing some progress in the offense, because then you come home and you get the Saints. And that could be a situation where the Saints could already find themselves 0-2. They don't think they've got anything on offense. And so they're kind of already beginning that process. And that schedule really does, in my opinion, start to soften up. And there's some stuff even in the second half. I believe there's Tennessee, Indy, and Atlanta in like a 4-week stretch. Like, man, those are the types of teams you kind of like to see in December. And so I'm very curious to see how long it'll take. But I hope that they can survive those first 2 games, because after that, it really, in my opinion, it really opens up, like Dan said, to they could really get into a groove.
Ryan, what's your biggest camp kind of question, we should say?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the defense. I think I think we're confident in Mike, and I expect this defense to be, elite for most of the year. But yeah, on the offensive side of the ball, I'm looking at, you know, how are they going to run the football, and the low hanging fruit that Dan brought up is the offensive line. But with the coaching staff now that they brought in, out is Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff. Now you have years on years of experience in the NFL that can work with this offensive line, and so you feel a lot more confident with that. And so my biggest thing too is just, how is that going to come together, once they get into pads, and then because that's going to set up, you brought up Sam Darnold. Is he going to look like the last 2? I don't think we're going to see Sam throwing the football like that in this offense. So that's something where if, at the beginning of the year last year, Mike McDonald wanted to run the football. We obviously went away from that super early. Now you hope that the emphasis is run the football, run the football, run the football this year, that we stick to it. And you feel confident with Clint and the guys that they brought in. I'm looking at who's going to step up, and is JSN, can he be that 1A alpha number 1 receiver? And do we need him to be? But I want to see, because now that DK Metcalf's out the door, how is this receiving core really going to come together, and JSN kind of taking that next step? I know that he was, he played 2 games without DK last season, and he played well, but now it's on his back to be that 1A guy that he's going to draw even more attention. So this receiving core, I'm just going to keep my eye on during camp, because I think it's exciting, because we got a mesh of guys. Cooper Kupp, can he stay healthy? He's that veteran guy. Bryce, you and I talked about a couple days ago that I don't think the Seahawks expect him to be the Triple Crown winner and be the old Cooper Kupp, but just be a solid guy in a slot and a veteran presence. So I'm keeping my eye on the receiving core. Can JSN kind of take that next step? And and just this offense in general. But I feel a lot more confident with the guys. Like we talked about. If you ran it back with Ryan Grubb, and all you did was add Gray Zabel and then you trade DK Metcalf. I mean, I would be very, very worried. I think a lot of this has to do with the new staff, the new scheme, and just the NFL experience on that side of the football. So I mean, that's how I look at it.
It's really interesting for me, because the area that my biggest question mark is actually the cornerback room, and it's not Witherspoon, Woolen, or Griffin. It's everything behind that now, and Joe. Because I look at it and I go, okay, they let Zy Alexander go. They have Waxter there. You've got Job, Griffin, Witherspoon, Woolen. It's an interesting group to see where the depth is and what this group cornerback room starts to turn into under Mike McDonald. You've got him in Rory. You've got D'Anthony Bell. You've got these safeties and Kobe Bryant and Julian Love as well. It's going to be really interesting to see how they play the number game. I still have questions about the depth behind. If Witherspoon misses, yes, I get Griffin's there. We're banking on Job off of essentially half a good season that he's going to play that way again in this system. And there were points last year where teams figured out to attack Josh Jobe, and Josh Jobe let up a bunch of big plays in different games where then Mike McDonald had to try and hide him in certain ways again. So for me, it's going to be interesting to see what this cornerback group turns into. And it's one that probably my biggest question mark outside of, again, the low-hanging fruit, the offensive line. And the other one for me is going to be, what does this interior linebacker group look like behind Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight? Like, one of me and Dan's favorites is Drake Thomas. He's a guy that we know they really like in that building, but he's not prototypical size, and he's more of a special teamer and play in a pinch kind of guy. They got Tyreek Jackson, who I think if healthy would have been a mid-round pick in this draft, but we got to see if he can stay healthy. Patrick O'Connell and Josh Ross are both special team fringe practice squad guys. If you lose Ernest Jones or Tyrese Knight at any point this season, that becomes really scary because we saw what happened last year with this defense with the wrong type of linebackers in place and how much it struggles. So those are the two areas for me that would be my quote unquote biggest question marks. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I'm going to be, interested to see with everything else you guys have, mentioned. And we haven't even touched on some of the camp battles. So let's kind of go into that. What are some of the camp battles you guys are most excited to see? I know which one I am, which is going to be the running back room. I think there's going to be a very interesting camp battle there. And the reason I say that is I'm really excited to see Damian Martinez. That's one guy for me that I have circled on my roster going, when I get down there for the training camp, where is 22 and how often is he toting the rock?
Yeah, you and I have been talking about Damian Martinez for 5 months, I think 6 months, going all the way back to the Senior Bowl, if not before. Yeah, that's going to be a really interesting one. I think the cornerback group, I want to see just what that rotation is going to be and how they're going to utilize those guys. How much is Devin Witherspoon going to play outside this year? If Nick Emmanwori gets really comfortable in there covering tight ends and running backs and playing in the box and being like a big nickel, that could free him up a little bit more to kind of bounce in and out. What does the depth chart look after that, right? But now with, after what we talked about at the top of the show, I'm really, really interested to see how the tight end room shakes out and how they end up using it and how Kubiak employs these guys. Maybe another reason that they felt comfortable moving on from Noah Fant is maybe Kubiak plans on using less 13 personnel, using more 3 wide receiver sets in this offense, as it evolves. And so I'm really interested now to see how that group shakes out. How many do they keep, right? We have to account for a fullback and a third quarterback this year. And who's number one and how often do they use 12 and 13 and kind of how that pecking order goes. I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah, I think for me, the low-hanging fruit one is the center position. I'm very curious to see how that will look in Kubiak's scheme. Kubiak, Shanahan, I know I keep saying this. That's a scheme where the center is very important. And so I know, Bryce, you and I talked about this the other day. A lot of people are pushing for Zabel to play center. I know he did that, a little bit of that in the combine. I don't think that is what is going to be in store, but we'll see. I think this is going to be a battle between Oluwatimi, a guy that Dan knows that I, had a big draft crush on and was excited to see him in Seattle. And I think it's been a mixed bag. And that's probably being a little bit, I don't know. I think he's been all right. I think you can do worse. But I also think you can do better. And I think Sundell is a very interesting person, a very interesting guy that all of us are very intrigued to see. Now that he might have a chance to be paired with his former teammate in Zabel, it's kind of almost like, man, what if we just North Dakota State this thing and just let them go at it? And then you have Olu, who just seems to me like a very steady presence as a backup center. And if Sundell gets hurt, I don't feel like we're going to miss a beat because I personally want to see Zabel be a guard. That is what I would like to see. And if those two fail, then yes, that's when Zabel, hey, can you step in and be a center for us? And we'll see how that goes. And then my wild card one, and I don't consider this a camp battle. This would be like 2012. So that's like a one-off, one in a million thing. But I'm curious to see what Milroe does. I'm curious to see what he does in camp. I'm curious to see what he does when he's probably going to get 2, maybe even 3 times the amount of snaps that we're going to see out of Darnold in these training camp game or in these preseason games. Like, what if he just comes out there and looks like he's just a man amongst boys with his athleticism? Does that create a scenario where he goes from getting 4 or 5 plays a game packages to where now it's like, oh, you're going to get 8, 9, 10 packages a game? And do we start? Because I feel like if he does, that definitely starts to build some momentum in the fan base just out of the pure excitement. And maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe he ends up just running into running himself right into the trenches and getting 2 yards in a cloud of dust, or it's just, again, I feel like this is more of a next year conversation, but you cannot deny he is arguably the most athletic quarterback in the league, right? For sure, probably the most athletic other than Lamar and Josh Allen to an extent. And I'm just very curious to see, because like journalists, that type of player, it's such an easy thing to write about. Fans that are going to be at the practice, or people that see things, like you're going to hear this, oh, wow, Jalen Milroe hit a 50. Like we've seen on Twitter, the guy that always says, oh, Shador Sanders threw a 13-yard touchdown pass. The league's in trouble. Like that's what we're going to get. I think we're going to
be a problem.
Yeah, he's going to be a problem. You guys all know who I'm talking about. Like that's what I'm excited to see with Milroe is just, we're all old enough to remember like just the holy cow, the hope, the possibility when we saw Russ come in. I don't think it's going to be that, but man, Jalen has just some of that it factor off the field, and he's definitely got that wow factor on the field that I'm and Dan knows this. I've talked about signing Darnold since like last Halloween. I'm a huge Darnold guy. I really think he's a great fit for this franchise and this scheme. But man, you can't deny like we're going to be seeing some very cool highlights from Jalen Milroe. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I've been saying since the day we drafted him that this might be the most entertaining preseason we've seen in a very long time because I think they are going to give him a lot of run, as you mentioned. Darnold's going to get more snaps than we saw Geno Smith get the last couple of years, but only because he's new to the organization, and I think they're going to want to make sure that he feels comfortable with the offense. But I think it's going to be a lot of Drew Lock, and it's going to be a lot of Jalen Milroe. And what's going to happen, you guys know what's going to happen. He's going to be in there in the third or fourth quarter of that first preseason game, and he's going to be playing against third or fourth stringers, if not worse. He's going to peel off a 25-yard scramble for a touchdown, and we're going to have to go on all of our shows and be bombarded with questions about should he be the starter. I know it's going to happen. I'm waiting for it. I'm prepared for it. But here's what gives me a lot of confidence in his potential to develop properly is I think the Seahawks they have a plan, and I think they're committed to that plan. The fact that they went out and signed Drew Lock to a 2-year contract and haven't said anything even remotely close to what Pete said, remember after rookie minicamp, when he announced to the world that like, hey, like I think it was after Russ's first practice or second practice in rookie minicamp where he said, wow, hey, this guy's great, and we're going to give him a chance to compete as a starter. It was kind of crazy at the time. Now, he ended up being right, and Russ was the best guy. This is a different situation. We're not talking about Matt Flynn here. But they've said all the right things. I think they're going to keep a damper on it, and I think they're committed no matter. Jalen Milroe could go 50 for 50 this preseason and score 10 touchdowns, and he's going to be the third quarterback on week 1 against the 49ers. I think they're committed to the plan, and it's the right thing to do.
I think the interesting thing with Milroe, at least from my perspective, and someone that works with quarterbacks and has done it for a long time, played the position, you don't need to rush this guy because the guys, like, I don't see Sam Darnold becoming Jets Sam Darnold. I don't see him becoming Carolina Sam Darnold. Like, I don't expect him to throw for 30 touchdown passes and close to 4,000 plus yards and whatnot. Because I think if that's the case, the run game is failing. If that's where Sam Darnold goes, the run game is failing because with all the weapons they put in, like me and Ryan had that conversation on our show not that long ago where I said, like, I could see Sam Darnold being between 30 and 25 touchdown passes with about between 12 and 10 picks for maybe 3,200 yards. But then we've got a plethora of running backs that have gone for 500 plus in the backfield. That's what the thing is with this offense. And there aren't a lot of built-in deep shot plays in this offense. And that's one thing that's been a criticism of this West Coast scheme is what do you do when you're down by 2 scores? We talked about it with the 49ers for years with Jimmy Garoppolo and all these other guys. Like, when they're down a couple of scores, it can be a problem to come back because the offense isn't designed for this deep, throw it, air it out passing game. It's designed to be exactly what Mike McDonald wants to be, which is a complementary piece to his elite defense. Run the ball, control the clock. You're like, if you think about big plays you've seen in the McVay offense or the Shanahan offense. And for years, it's always Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods or George Kittle or one of these guys running a crossing over route, and it's off a bootleg, and they hit it behind the linebackers for 15 or 17 yards when he catches it, and he runs for 25 or 30. It's not a 40-yard bomb down the sidelines like we were getting accustomed to with Geno to DK, Geno throwing the deep post to Tyler. Like, those aren't things that are built into this offense. This offense is about misdirection. It's about consistently running the ball. And I think there's going to be points where it's going to be 2nd and 7, and we're going to be accustomed to what we've seen the last couple of years, which is, okay, we're going to throw it here, right? We're going to push it past the sticks. No, they're going to turn and hand it to one of these running backs. Robbie Oots may even be in the backfield with 2 tight ends, and they're going to smash it in there for another 4 yards and be 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, and run it again. Like, that's, I think, the thing we got to get used to is, I'm going to be shocked if Sam Darnold has any games where he's got 35 attempts plus passing. I think that's going to be a real rarity. And if that's the case, Seattle probably lost that game by being outscored significantly.
Yeah, and I think too with the whole Milroe excitement, like if he goes 50 for 50, I think there's the camp of Seahawks fans that still don't believe in Sam Darnold. Bryce, you alluded to, like, I don't think he's going to turn back into Jet Sam Darnold. That's a lot of people think that, right? And especially, what have you done for me lately, right? They think about, oh, well, look at the last 2 games he had. Not looking at the whole body of work that, in the MVP conversations throughout the season. It was like, oh, he turned back into Jet Sam Darnold, or that's the Sam that you're really supposed to get. That's the real Sam Darnold. So I think coming in here, there's a lot of fans that still, it's almost like he's got to prove it again. But again, it's a different looking offense too. So you're not going to, A, there's no Justin Jefferson. B, we're not going to expect him to sit back and throw the ball around the field. So, but I do think there's that part of prove it, show me you can do it back-to-back years kind of thing. But to Bryce's point, like, yeah, you'd be shocked if it's X amount of throws, because of the way, like, I think we just, our last show, we talked about this identity is obvious. It's defense and run. So, if that's going to be the identity of the team, then Sam just has to be that ultimate game manager, not screw it up, not turn the ball over, not throw red zone interceptions that we've been seeing. And then we'll be fine, right? So, and then real quick, going to my battles, my eyes are on this running game, man, because again, this is going to be the focal point of this offense. And this Damian Martinez guy, I'm super excited about him. I mean, talk about a bruiser, talk about a guy that sort of we've been lacking in the run game. And people sometimes like, well, he's a 7th rounder. One of my favorite backs ever to suit up for the Seahawks was a 7th round pick in Chris Carson. So, you think about that, right? And another 7th rounder in Kenny Mack that's going to be battling out for a spot too. So, it's going to be interesting with K9 too, because, obviously there's injury history there, and he's in a contract year. Yeah, who knows at this point what this organization wants to do? This is a whole new era with Mike and John, and it's going to be interesting. How long's K9 going to be here? If this Damian Martinez kid just blows up and they like his style, he's going to see a lot more football. So that's something that I and Halani's still here, so I'm excited to really watch these backs start going at it, and then just get going. But yeah, Milroe, to Mike's point, man, like, yeah, I think what's going to be super exciting watching him is you're kind of, you're, not jinxing him, but you're potentially watching the future in these preseason games, opposed to just some backup, right? So that sort of even makes it more intriguing when you're seeing what Milroe can do, even though it's a couple of years away potentially. But so yeah, those are I think things I'm fired about.
I think my thing with Milroe is, I think we're all in agreement. Like, best case scenario probably means, well, best case scenario is that we probably never see Milroe be the starter, right? It's because we guessed right with Sam Darnold. We do get a top 10 quarterback, and all of a sudden, we're in Super Bowl contention this year and over into the future. But I think the thing that's interesting with Milroe is he just creates, like, everything we just talked about, you guys. Like, this offense feels kind of like, if the offensive line's halfway decent, it can be a very successful Shanahan Kubiak style offense. Like, those deep crossing routes that Bryce was talking about, that is like, if Cooper can be healthy for 3 or 4 more years, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame because of those types of routes. Those routes is what JSN, in my personal opinion, is freaking built for, right? Like, I think this really fits those two. And I think these tight ends are really exciting. And the offensive line, we'll see with the running backs. Like, I expect things are going to go well this year. Then that means Kenneth Walker is going to get the ball a zillion times, and we're going to run him into the ground and then let him walk in free agency. That would be my guess. But like, just talking about everything that we just talked about, is we all think we've got a really special defense building right now, right? I assume we're all in agreement of that. And so what you want to do is you want to control ball control. And that was the exact opposite of what we've been able to do the last couple years and last year with Grubb. And so Milroe can potentially do that. How many 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s, 2nd and 1s did we all just know, oh my gosh, how is this going to end up backfiring, right? The Jets game, we all remember the Jets game. We lost the division because we couldn't get, what was it, 2nd and 1 against the Rams in field goal range. And we went basically, turned the ball over and lost our season against the Rams at home. Like, I'm very interested to see, does Milroe show enough to earn those plays? Or does that meet Damian Martinez? Because personally, I like Kenneth Walker. Personally, I like Zach Charbonnet. Those are not the type of running backs that I think of for getting that 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 when you have to move the chains and potentially run another 2 to 3 to 4 minutes off the clock, which is what the scheme is built around to complement what is the face of this franchise right now, which is Mike McDonald and his potentially Super Bowl developing defense. Like, I'm curious, like, you want to get to 11 wins, you want to win the division, ball control, top 10 defense, top 15 offense, maybe even a little bit better, and you just milk the clock. You just engineer long drives and you get points where you can get them. And we hopefully win a lot of games, 17 or 20 to 10 or 20 to 14 or something like that.
A couple of things I wanted to touch on. One is to Bryce's point earlier, just made me want to pull it up here. So Derek Carr, we know he battled some injuries last year. He started 10 games for the New Orleans Saints, only had more than 30 passing attempts in 4 of those games. And one was 30, 2 were 31, 1 was 37. So yeah, you're right. We're not going to see, Sam Darnold having some of those Geno Smith games where he puts the team on his back and throws it 50 times trying to win it. I also want to address something that's a pretty big conversation in the comments right now. One of our viewers is saying that the Seahawks lack a number 1 wide receiver, in particular, a guy that can take the top off and is a deep threat. And without that, this offense can't function. All I'm going to say is this. So this is the Mike Shanahan, Gary Kubiak offense, right? Mm-hmm. Which shares DNA and spawned Kyle Shanahan's offense, Sean McVay's offense, and all the others that have then branched off of that as those guys from their coaching trees have gone on to get offensive coordinator and head coaching positions elsewhere. Take a moment, Google, ChatGPT, whatever you want to do. Look up Puka Nakua's 40 time. Look up Cooper Kupp's 40 time. Look up Robert Woods' 40 time. Look up Brandon Ayuk's 40 time. But just stick to the Rams and how successful they are in that exact same passing offense. You absolutely do not need a 4-2, 4-3 guy to make this offense work. It's built off condensed splits. You have to be able to block. It's about route running and being able to beat a guy in space. Sean McVay has not, in his 10 years in LA, had a legitimate take the top off deep threat to keep defenses honest because he hasn't had to. So that's just what I'll say about that. And plus, Torrey Horton runs a 4-3.
And the one thing I'll add to that is, if you look even farther back, Dan, to what you're talking about there and where this offense is spawned from, we've seen actually this offense before in Seattle. Some don't realize. Mike Holmgren ran this offense for years. We never had a burner in that offense. Our best receivers in that offense were Bobby Ingram, Darrell Jackson, guys that were great route runners.
Joe Juravicious,
DJ Hackett. There you go. There's some other guys that were in that grouping.
Danica Wallace.
Yeah.
Ben Obamanu. But if you look at this offense, like you don't need this burner, and everyone thinks, oh, you need an X in this offense. If you go back and look at the history of where this offense has spawned from in this receiver group, you can have two guys with similar skill sets. And it's actually, in some respects, more to the norm of this offense than it is to have multiple guys with different skill sets, because it makes it harder to plug and play, especially when your tight ends are such an integral part in the system. We're not going to see a lot of 3 receiver, 4 receiver sets. It's going to be a lot of 2 receivers in condensed splits with tight ends. And one of those tight ends is going to be what you classify as a move tight end or a U-type tight end that you move across the formation. That's where you're going to see they're going to create problems for the defense based on how they align more than they are going to try and beat you with pure athleticism and speed. It's great to have a deep threat. I love the fact that MVS is here and Torrey Horton. And once you do get them to load the blocks and you do take that play action shot down the field, you have some guys that can go vertical and get it. But that's not what we're going to base this offense on anymore. It's going to be about running. It's going to be about creating separation in our route running. And that's where a lot of these guys have success and keys. So with that being said, guys, because we've kind of exasperated that conversational topic, let's get into the roster construction here. Let's get into our 53-man roster production before, obviously, training camp opens. So one of the things I already know is Noah Fant will be on this, so we can just leave him off and just not have him on there. But we'll get into this right now. And give me 1 second here to bring it up. And there we go. And I'll take that off your face, Mike. I apologize. You're hiding down there in the corner, and it wanted to block you out. So yeah, guys. So this is the German Seahawkers roster simulation. Dan, I know you use it a lot. I love it. It's great. The way they built it, it makes it really easy and friendly to use. So guys, I think it's pretty obvious. Quarterback, we're keeping all 3, right?
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Okay. So let's move over to receiver. Now, this is where it starts. Do we want to go right to receiver, or do we want to go to offensive line first and work our way back? I think is more of an interesting kind of caveat to this. So let's go offensive line. So Olu and Sundell are making this roster, I assume, is our thoughts and feelings.
100%.
Okay. Yep. So we'll put Olu and Sundell on here. There he is. We're going to totally cut Gray Zabel. Just doesn't work out. I'm sorry. I'm joking. Everyone, don't hate me in the comments. But Gray Zabel, Charles Cross, I think that's pretty safe to say. Abe Lucas is safe to say that we'll put him on there. So now we've got 5 guys accounted for right there across the board. Christian Haynes making this roster, we think, coming out of camp?
Oh, 100%. I do. I think he's a starting right guard.
Okay.
Yep. Back to where he's supposed to be.
Does Anthony Bradford make it on this roster, or does he become a potential trade candidate if he doesn't win the starting job?
Man, I'm operating under the assumption this year that they're only going to carry 9 offensive linemen. That's the number that they used to carry. And then they went, 2 years ago it was 10 and last year it was 11, but only because they wanted to protect some of the young players on the roster, guys like Sundell, guys like Mike Jarrell, who they didn't think were going to have to be called upon as rookies, but they were afraid of exposing to waivers because they weren't going to make it through to the practice squad. They've been cross-training so many of these guys at so many different positions that I think they would like to just go with 9. And so, I think Anthony Bradford's a guy that doesn't have as much versatility, whereas someone like Satawa Lamea, who the coaches always seem to find time to rave about, can play both guard spots. We haven't seen Bradford play left guard. We have seen Lamea play left and right guard. And I think Lamea, even though Bradford played some tackle in college, played some left tackle, surprisingly enough, didn't do it as much as Lamea did. Lamea started for 2 years at right tackle and was all Pac-12. The old Pac-12 was all conference at guard and tackle. And so if you were in a pinch during a game and a couple guys went down, as we saw last year, he could kick out there and get you out of a game. I think Bradford's lack of versatility might hurt him. I also think if Haynes wins the job outright, I think some gap power team out there would maybe toss us a late day 3 pick, a conditional pick for Anthony Bradford, an elite athlete at 340 pounds that might fit that type of scheme better. I don't think he makes this roster.
So the interesting thing for me is I look at some of the guys they picked last year, and I kind of actually put LeMaya in that grouping, as LeMaya might be the only one that survives. I look at Cable Dew and Mason Richmond were both guys Rick Dennison and John Benton wanted. Outside of Gray Zabel, they wanted Cable Dew and they wanted Mason Richmond. And again, we're talking about guys that have a lot of starts. Bryce Cable Dew tested almost the exact same as Gray Zabel in his RAS score. And he was a tackle. Now they're going to move him inside. I tend to agree that I think whoever doesn't win between Bradford and Haynes could be a potential trade piece that you could move on. Like if Bradford wins out, maybe they keep Haynes and then they move off from someone like LeMaya because they're keeping Christian Haynes instead. In this exercise, we say Haynes makes it. He's going to be the starter. I'm going to say Bryce Cable-Dew makes this team. I think he gives you, like you were talking about, flexibility there, Dan. He can play tackle for a pinch, but he also, I think, is going to come in and be an elite level talent potential ceiling guy as a guard. And I think he fits what they want to do offensively more than, like you were just saying, gap power with Bradford versus wide zone. A lot of that is really getting to the second level. And I think, yes, Anthony Bradford's had to change his body, which they've talked about this year in the offseason. Mike McDonald and a bunch of them have already kind of brought that up, which to me is an interesting point because it's almost admitting that, like, you have to have a certain body to fit this scheme. And if you don't, you're in trouble. So they've clearly made that a strong message to him. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, if you go back and you look at Christian Haynes' draft profile, I mean, it screamed he should be a right guard in a zone blocking type of scheme, right? I believe that's where he graded best. I want to say it was in the 98th percentile coming out of UConn, despite, the tape being a little interesting or his body not being exact proper fit, which for some of you guys that remember from the Mike Shanahan years, how many times did we hear about that with his offensive line in Denver, just being a little bit of a weird shaped, a little bit different. And then what happened every year? Their running backs ran for 1,000 yards. I mean, even us could have ran for a few hundred yards against some of those guys back in the day and stuff. And so I think Haynes is the fit there. I'm not trying to be cold, but I feel like if Bradford was protected, he would have earned that spot by now. And I just don't think he does. And I don't think the scheme fits exactly with what we're seeing. And man, if you're Philadelphia, that's the type of thing where, a Bradford, maybe he is a fit over there. And that's, that's the type of team that would love to give, oh yeah, sure, we'll give you a seventh that could be a conditional sixth, or, just here's a seventh, take it and leave it or leave it. And I can see them and him fitting in perfectly there. I don't think that's a fit. And then I don't know if you guys saw it this summer, but Brian Baldinger did one of his cool, social media posts where he just does a deep dive on a random player and that he really is high on. And he did one on LeMaya on some tape again for him. I believe it was the Jets. And Baldinger is not, he's not the Bible, but he's someone that I really value their opinion and really like what he has to say and his thoughts on it and stuff. And I just think Haynes and LeMaya, I think that is more likely to be a battle if there is a battle than it is with Bradford. I feel kind of like the ship has sailed and he might just be the odd man out.
And to figure out the interior, I almost feel like we kind of need to, and you got to look at historical roster construction too, but kind of have to start on the outside and work your way back in, right? Last year at the beginning of the season, George Fant was supposed to be the starter. We knew Abe Lucas was going to start the season on the pup. He was supposed to be the starting right tackle, but they still kept Stone Forsythe and Michael Jarrell. Now, maybe they wouldn't have normally kept Jarrell if they thought there was a chance they can get him to the practice squad. That's sometimes, again, these decisions may be made. We're all thinking in terms of who the best players are. But from their perspective, they're the ones with the ear to the ground. John Schneider knows in the rest of the league as well as any GM in the league. If, some of these decisions may be made more on we don't want to lose that guy. But you have a healthy Abe Lucas to go along with Charles Cross. You have Josh Jones who can play left and right tackle. And so I think they're probably only going to keep one more guy that can play tackle. And so is that Michael Jarrell or is that Mason Richmond, right? We don't know. And until we know that, and that's what some of the information that we'll get as soon as training camp starts. It's probably one of the first things I'm going to be looking at is how are they deploying the offensive linemen, who's playing where and who's playing when and on which line. And then we can kind of decide what we want from the interior. Setting the Edge made a good point here. He said that, Kubiak kept 10 offensive linemen last year in New Orleans, and that could be telling because John Benton was his offensive line coach there, and he'll be involved in that decision. So maybe it is 10, in which case I think there's a lot of flexibility to keep a guy like Cable do there, as Bryce pointed out.
So I think for this group, I think Josh Jones is going to be your primary swing tackle to start the season.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put him in. That gives us 7. I think your next 3 guys, because here's my point with Michael Jarrell. I think you can sneak him through to the practice squad. He's still very raw. And with the way that waivers work now and the massive cut down that there is, it's not throughout stages. Mm-hmm. You might be able to sneak him through and get him to the practice squad. I don't think his tape last year entices enough teams to go, yeah, we need to prioritize him and go get him. They'd be more likely to probably take a guy that's got more NFL reps, that's played a few more years than they were to take Mike Jarrell. So I think there's a chance, like you guys said, I think Lamea currently is the number 2 left guard behind Gray Zabel, is what he worked at most of OTAs. So I think that's a value piece. Now we got 2 more. I think it's going to be Richmond and Cable Do, because both guys were guys Benton and Rick Dennison wanted. Right. And if they're going to this scheme, and the other thing I think a lot of people forget about Mason Richmond, yes, he may not be the most athletically gifted tackle. He started for 4 years at one of the most offensive line driven colleges in college football in Iowa. There's only one guy that started his entire time otherwise at Iowa for that O-line coach, and that's Tristan Wirfs, who's a pretty good offensive lineman.
Yeah, he's not bad.
I'm okay taking Mason Richmond and having him be, again, a guard tackle swing player for me that can play in both. And as long with Cable, I think there is a good chance they take 10. That's kind of been, I just looked it up, kind of a history of Kubiak when he has been, even in Minnesota. He had 10 offensive linemen coming out of camp. So I think that's a safe bet. They go with 10.
I think that's a good group. And, the only kind of wild card there would be Bradford. But I think it seems like we're all in agreement, as are the commenters, that he probably isn't going to be on this 53-man roster. I think they're going to keep clear scheme fits.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to, go with, just because of the fact all these guys, one, you get versatility, but they all generally have a more athletic profile to them. I would say, even Olu fits to an extent. He's an athletic center. He can move. He's not this plug that we all kind of thought because of what he did at Michigan. He moved a lot when he was at Michigan. So let's now look at tight end. I think this is an interesting group. Obviously, Noah Fant, has already been taken off. Excellent. They were on top of that.
Nice.
That's great. So Elijah Arroyo, AJ Barner, I think Eric Saubert is going to actually be a real key in this offense. And I don't think people are talking about it enough. He is a guy I have heard Kubiak wanted in free agency. He was a guy that he had circled that I need this type of tight end, and this is the guy I want in my offense. He has a skill set that Arroyo and Barner don't have, which is he is an exceptional blocker. He has special teams versatility as well and can help out there. I think he's going to be the third guy, and I only think they're going to come in with 3 tight ends into camp now. Now that Noah Fant's gone, I think it's these 3. Unless Marshall Lang or Nick Callerup come in and really surprise and show they're better than Eric Saubert, I don't think we see much of a change there in that grouping. Am I safe to say that?
No, I think you're on the money. And plus, we're going to talk about fullback here and who that fullback job. And I expect it to be Robbie Oots. But even if he gets banged up or if Brady Russell just beats him out, those are guys that have been lifetime tight ends. And so it gives you a de facto 4th tight end on the roster, and you're not having to take a quote unquote extra roster spot, because they have kept 4 tight ends in the past, even though they haven't used them as much as Kubiak is likely going to use them. And then whoever doesn't make it, I think not giving anything away, but my vote would be, I think Robbie Oots makes his team as a fullback if he's healthy. I don't think they're going to have any trouble getting Brady Russell to the practice squad. If he wants to stay with the organization, he may choose to go somewhere else and sign with someone else. But I think that's the scenario.
Okay, so let's look at running back here. So I think we're safe to say Ken Walker probably is on this 53-man roster. I don't see him getting traded.
No, and it's come up in the comments again, and people still want to talk about trading him. You have to trade somebody. There has to be demand. There has to be a need from someone else, someone that and it was never going to happen before the draft because this was a historically deep and good running back class. Teams aren't going to give up draft capital, and pay for a veteran running back when they can get a cheaper, younger one in the draft. So I don't think there's demand. Teams aren't banging down John Schneider's door right now trying to trade for Ken Walker.
So Zach Charbonnet, I'm going to put on. Okay, that'll make it. And I'm going to say I think Robbie Oots wins the fullback position. I think he's a more versatile, and I think he's going to be a better player than Brady Russell. So we're at theoretically 3 now. So do we believe Damian Martinez is on the opening 53-man roster?
I do. I think he makes it.
I do as well. That's 2 votes.
You know how I feel about Damian Martinez. I see him as a future starter on this team. I really do.
Yeah.
But I also like Ken McIntosh. I just want to say that for John McGrath's sake. I know he's over there in the comments waiting to pounce because he loves, and we've talked about this a lot in the past. I love Kenny McIntosh too.
I love Kenny Mac too.
I just think that if you're keeping a fullback, you probably can only roster 3 true running backs on this roster. And I think Kenny McIntosh, I think he gets through. I think you can get him through to the practice squad. I really do. He ran a 4.6 coming out of college. Running backs grow on trees. Go look at over the cap and type in, look at free agent running backs. Look at how many guys are still out there without jobs right now. Plus all the guys on 90-man rosters who are going to be cut. I don't think teams are going to be lining up to get Kenny McIntosh I think he gets through waivers and gets to the practice squad if he's released. So that's kind of how I sit on that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I really believe, I love Kenny Mack. I love what he did at the end of last year. But again, he's a guy that I don't think there's enough tape out there for a team necessarily to go and be like, yeah, we're prioritizing him as hey, when does he go on the waiver cut? Where's his name? And that's the other thing where I think when this used to be a stage cut down process, there would probably be a higher chance you lose Kenny McIntosh because someone loses a running back in week 2 of preseason. Now they're looking for the guy that's been lighting it up in preseason games.
Right.
Now it's like they get there. There's a plethora of guys. They all get dumped into this waiver period. It makes it a lot harder to pick guys out. And I think Kenny McIntosh is a guy you can sneak through to the practice squad. You would probably be a guy that you'd probably put on the protected practice squad list, which you can do. I think this is the 4 they go with because I do believe Damian Martinez. I had a 4th round grade on Damian Martinez. I was shocked he was there in the 7th round, but it was because it was such a deep running back class.
Yeah, I was taking him in the 3rd round in some of my mocks. I'll say this about those concerned about that we might lose Damian or Kenny McIntosh if we expose him to waivers. I had people telling me last year, especially after that Charger game when he had the touchdown, a couple nice runs, we can't afford to expose George Halani to waivers. He's so good. He's bigger than McIntosh. He's faster than McIntosh. We had no problem getting him through to the practice squad last year. Nobody signed him off of waivers. I just think there's going to be so many running backs available at that time. You can't keep all these guys. I know someone suggested why can't you just keep 4? Well, once we start doing the math, and we can go back and revisit it when we're done with this roster, keeping a 3rd quarterback and a fullback changes the entire dynamic.
So let's go to receiver now. So I'm going to click the guys we know will be here. Cooper Kupp, JSN, looking through this. Torrey Horton's going to be on this group.
MVS.
Now, this is where I'm going to make my pitch, and I don't even know if it's really a discussion. Some people may disagree with me in the group. I think Jake Bobo is on this roster because Jake Bobo fits a role in this scheme that some of these guys don't. He's a bigger body that can block as a receiver, much to what Michael talked about earlier in Juwan Jennings. I think he's a poorer man's version of Juwan Jennings, which is a receiver they want in this offense. I think he's going to be a guy that might actually fit better in this offense than he has in the prior 2 with Shane Waldron and Ryan Grubb. Last year is almost a write-off for me because I don't think Grubb knew how to use that type of receiver. I don't think we're going to have that problem with Clint Kubiak. Mike, what are your thoughts on the rest of this receiver group?
Yeah, I think he makes it. I'm excited to see him in that role. I think it's also more of a testament of who else is actually going to take that spot from him, if that makes sense. I just, just looking at these names, which guy stands out there that you're like, oh, I think he has a real shot to steal his job. I don't know if I see that right now, to be honest.
The only one for me is Ricky White. That's
which I do like Ricky.
One.
Yeah.
So we're at this point, we're at 24. I think they keep 5. And the reason I say they keep 5 is I think Elijah Royal will see quite a few reps out as the X receiver.
And isn't the expectation that Ricky White's probably going to be a returner for us?
There's also Steven Sims. Torrey Horton can do it as well.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. They've kept 7 receivers on some of their opening 53-man rosters in the past, primarily for special teams reasons. But the math doesn't math, as we've been saying, to do. I don't think more than 5 this year, and that's where, man, I'd hate to lose Ricky White, because I do see the upside as a receiver down the road, not just a special teams guy. But I think, Bryce, I think you're one of the ones that changed my mind on this. At the beginning of the offseason, when I did my first 53-man roster, I didn't have Jake Bobo making the team. For that reason, I think I had Ricky White making it over him because of the upside. I have turned around on that. And a lot of it is what you're talking about, the blocking ability, the buzz coming out of OTAs and how he fit in, but also this. We just spent the first 10 minutes of the show talking about how they got rid of their starting tight end from last year and looking for flexibility on this roster and guys that are versatile. And even though, I'm not saying they're going to convert Jake Bobo to a tight end, but Jake Bobo can do tight end things in this offense, in those condensed splits, as a big slot. Kind of if you're going to go 13 personnel, you can basically put Jake Bobo out there and run some of those middle of the field routes. I think he embodies everything that they like in how they guys want in how they want guys to play the game.
So here's the interesting thing I'm going to throw out here. And I think out of this group of 5, Torrey Horton staying healthy is going to put, and if he has a good camp and a good preseason, this is kind of one of my bold takes that we'll talk about a little later. I think there's a chance that they could keep a Ricky White and release an MVS.
Yeah.
For
Absolutely.
keeping Ricky White, because they're afraid to potentially lose him. And MVS is someone they look at that maybe they can get, because they can get him back on the practice squad. They do have those veteran roles. Maybe that's how they look at it in protecting Ricky White from that and exposing MVS. And Torrey Horton has a good camp. He has a lot of the same skill sets, and I think a better receiver as running full routes and all that than MVS is. MVS is really a one-trick pony.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I could also see a situation where they do exactly what you're talking about and then bring Valdez-Scantling back after week 1 when veteran contracts don't have to be guaranteed anymore. Give him a chance to get out there and see if there's another opportunity for him. But I could see White making the initial 53 so they can protect him. MVS could always come back after that.
All right, so now let's move over to the defensive side of the ball here, and we'll go over to that. Let's see here. We're good here. How do I move it over to defense? Why is this thing not cooperating? There we go. Next. All right, linebackers. So this also includes edge rushers. So Ernest Jones, Tyrese Knight, Boy Mafe, Derek Hall. I think Chena's on this roster.
For now.
Yeah, for now. Am I missing somebody in here? Okay, so
DeMarcus Lawrence, or is he listed as a quote defensive end? Okay,
yes, he is listed as a quote defensive end. So out of this linebacker group, we've got our inside in Knight and Jones, then we got 3 edges in Mafe, Hall, and Chena. I think 2 guys here for me. I think Derek Thomas makes this roster because I think he's better than Pat O'Connell. Personally, in my opinion. Yeah. So I think he makes it. I think Derek Smith and Jared Ivey are 2 edge players to be, and I don't think Jared Ivey is a linebacker. I think he's more of a D end in this scheme. He's a bit heavier than what they look at. So I think they should probably move him in here. But I think the fact that they brought Smith back to a new regime after they cut him out of the Pete Carroll one and cut him and sent him off, I think it's interesting they brought him back.
Yeah, and they've been saying nice things about him. He's one of those guys I got really high on a couple of years ago before they released him and he went to Arizona for a year. So I'm trying not to fall into that trap again. The edge thing is interesting, and I almost wonder if we kind of need to keep it at 4 and then wait and see how the math works out and see if we can sneak a 5th guy in there, right? So,
yep.
So
that's what we want to add as that edge. Because who do we got? Chena, Derek Hall, Boy Mafe. Who's the other edge guy?
Well, and I I consider DeMarcus Lawrence an edge, and so we'll kind of have to fit that in, and that gives you 4. But they carried 5 last year because Travis Gibson was their 5th edge because Draymond Jones was playing edge last year, and so you had the other 3 that we still have, and then you had Draymond Jones, and you had Travis Gibson and who never played really. And so maybe they don't need that 4th guy this year. I think they want Jared Ivey to make the team.
I think they do as well. I think Jared Ivey is actually someone they're really banking on making this team.
I don't see Trey Hendrickson on there. Where do I click on?
I also don't see Micah Parsons either, Mike. I'm sorry.
All right, fine. Yeah, no, I think definitely it's one of those things where we might need to go back and subtract someone, but for now, I think you guys are right. I think Ivy would be my first pick.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the D-line and we'll work our way back. So D-line, Leonard Williams,
Big Cat,
sorry, Byron Murphy, Jaron Reed, DeMarcus Lawrence,
Hankins.
Now, okay, so this is where it gets interesting. I find it interesting Justin Rogers has now been brought in. He's a big guy. They brought Hankins back, yes, but I don't know if Hankins is out of the woods of potentially being cut. Everyone is so enamored with this big nose tackle deal. It's not necessarily a mainstay in this defense. They need a monstrous nose tackle. And so I think Riley Mills is someone that I think we add to this because he's going to be on this team regardless. He's not going anywhere. And I think he will play at some point this season.
Yeah.
So we'll add Riley Mills here. Sorry, there we go. So if you look at that list and you're counting DeMarcus Lawrence as an edge, is there anybody in here? I don't think Mike Morris makes this team because of Riley Mills.
I think, I don't think Mills is going to be ready to go week 1. And so it's a real question mark. It's one of my big bubble questions going into training camp is, can Mike Morris take a step and show us something and make this team? But I think
anything.
But I think they play. They're going after a similar role, and so I think if Mike Morris makes the 53, it may only be as a placeholder until Riley Mills is healthy.
So I'm going to throw a caveat at you both.
Yeah.
Would you rather have Mike Morris on this roster or Jared Ivey?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that question because if you remember, I was really high on Mike Morris. He was one of my draft crushes. I mocked him in the 5th round in just about every single draft I did that year. But also I was thoroughly unimpressed with Jared Ivey the entire week in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Didn't show me any juice going up against some of the better offensive linemen. I just didn't see it. And so it didn't surprise me he went undrafted. But then, he's on my team, and you start to look into him a little deeper, and you start to watch some tape and listen to other experts and analysts talk about him. And I've talked myself into the idea of him, but I still haven't seen it with my own eyes. And so it's really, really hard for me to choose between those two. I wish Riley Mills was healthy. He'd make this a whole hell of a lot easier.
I agree.
Yeah.
He would.
Yeah. I think Mills is going to be like that sneaky thing that nobody's talking about right now, that when comes playoff time, he might be getting like legit snap counts in games that are us either in the playoffs or trying to get into the playoffs. Like, for anybody that watched Notre Dame, like he was one of their 2 or 3 best defensive players on a championship caliber defense last year and stuff. And just a shame he got hurt. I'm right there with Dan. Dan, there's probably a lot of receipts of you and I talking about Morris, that draft. Mm-hmm. I think it's one of those things where you can't discredit the Michigan connection and maybe just Mike wanting him to give him another shot, like we're talking about, whether that's 6 weeks or half the season, whatever that is, until Riley's ready. But at the same time, it's kind of those things where like I have seen enough of Mike to where I'm ready to see something else and give another shot with Ivy. And if anybody, has been up that close, it was you, Dan, down there in Mobile, seeing what you saw. And I trust your analysis on those things. And so I think if I was a betting person, I'd bet Morris gets the shot just because he's been here. He's been with Mike. I think Ty kind of might go to the college connection, but I personally would rather see Ivy at this point.
So I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. And to what your point is, I wonder if Mike doesn't look at Mike Morris and go, I've seen you. I know what you are. I want to go with the guy that has the higher ceiling, which I think is Jared Ivey. I think Jared Ivey, he even in college was more of an impactful player than Mike Morris was on those Michigan's defenses. Like Mike Morris had moments, but Jared Ivey had more consistent moments. And I think there's a hope maybe that they can tap into that with Jared Ivey and use him. So I say we keep Ivey and let Mike Morris walk. I added Jonathan Hankins just so everyone knows he has been added to this. So we'll add Ivey back in a second. Let's get to cornerback. So Witherspoon, Wolin, Shaq, Joe are our 4. I think Waxter's going to be the 5th. I think he's someone they're really high on. The other one is Jean Charles is the other guy I'm interested in because of his special teams capabilities.
I
like
don't.
Waxter.
I'll have to see Waxter to make a judgment. I always am going to pause when it comes to outside corners that run 4.6s. Like that's a tough obstacle to overcome. And even when they signed him, I thought, just checking out his profile because I wasn't familiar with him before that. I thought this looks like a safety convert. Like at some point, this looks like a guy that's going to end up playing safety because I'm not ready to give up on Nehemiah Pritchett yet. And I don't think the team is either. As a guy that was drafted just a year ago in the 5th round, and there were some pretty positive reports on him coming out of OTAs. So I'm not ready to hand his spot over to Waxter yet, just because it's this guy that doesn't have juice, he doesn't have burst, he doesn't have long speed, and that concerns me.
So let's do this. Let's go to safety for a second, and we'll pick all the safeties that'll be on this team. And this is the 3 that we have and we know of. This puts us at 19 right now on defense, total players.
So what are we at total right now? How
many?
Total,
we're at 44 out of 53. I can quickly let me skip ahead. I'll put the special guys on there so it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, there's no question. We're not going to spend a lot of time debating this, right?
No. So we're at 47 players.
Okay.
Total out of 53. I think, and DeAnthony Bell is going to be a big factor, more than people realize in some of these sub packages. The reason I say that is I think when we go to dime or big nickel, there's a chance, because we don't know what this linebacker depth interior wise is going to look like, you may see Nick Emenwari or DeAnthony Bell, because they're both 215 plus, playing a weak side linebacker spot next to Ernest Jones in there. And that's where I think they might kind of create another linebacker in the aggregate, and this defense for certain sub packages is moving DeAnthony Bell or Nick Emenwari there. I think DeAnthony Bell makes this. I think Jarek Reed has to have a stellar camp to make it on this team this year.
Man, I really want to see, I saw so many flashes and things that I liked from Jarek Reed before he got hurt. I'm really interested. He's one of the guys I'm most anxious to see this preseason. But we've got a lot more flexibility here to work with than I thought. And just for historical context, just looking back at the last couple of rosters, but last year's initial 53, they kept 5 safeties and 5 corners. I thought that was going to be kind of tough to do on this roster because they kept 4 inside linebackers too. And I don't know if that's necessary as much as they're going to play nickel. So, we do have, I'm surprised that we have 6 spots left to play with at this point. But yeah, I think DeAnthony Bell just kept getting, almost every day out of OTAs and minicamp. Like when the reporters on the ground watching what was going on there were talking about standouts each day, Bell was making plays.
I also think when you look at the rest of these safeties and Reed, Finley, and Okada, I think they can all sneak through to practice. Okada's been there numerous times. I know Mike McDonald loves Ty Okada. He brings him up unprompted sometimes. I think he's a guy you can sneak through the practice squad. So what I'm going to do is go back to linebacker. I'm going to add Jared Ivey to that group. So that puts us at 21 on defense right now. So that's 60 linemen. That's your 3 inside. Now, like I said, are we going to add a Tyreek Jackson or another inside linebacker? Or do you guys think they're going to probably use a DeAnthony Bell and Nick Emenwari to recreate that 4 spot?
I know you guys have had Greg Bell on your show. Maybe you talked about this. He talked about it on mine. He said that Nick Emenwari was getting a lot of run in OTAs and minicamp at weak side linebacker, that Even though at the beginning of OTAs, McDonald told us he was going to play a lot in the box, and they were going to wait to kind of teach him some of the deep safety stuff. Greg said he was playing a lot of weak side linebacker. I think that's one of those spots on the roster where you can kind of save a roster spot, and you keep Drake Thomas. He can play Mike and Will, and maybe you don't keep a Patrick O'Connell or a Derek Jackson as your fourth guy, because those are also two guys that can get to the practice squad without any issues, I'm convinced. Maybe you only keep 3 true inside linebackers on your initial 53 because Emenwari basically can play that role, and because you're going to play, essentially, I think nickel's going to be their base.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think with Emenwari, like we're talking about here, I know he's pick 35, but we're talking about another, essentially a first round pick, and a guy that we've kind of considered, is this a chess piece, type of move for Mike McDonald, like a big, a Kyle Hamilton style player. And obviously I think there's a little bit of differences, but like, even though he's a rookie, that contract speaks to itself. Like, this is a guy that they're going to want to get on the field and get good value out of. And if you can get him at any possible spot, you put him in there. We have the luxury of, on the first level, a very, talented and successful looking secondary. And you just added Nick. So if that's a way to get him an extra couple snaps a game, I'm all for it. And I don't think that the player that would lose that roster spot is worth not getting those extra snaps to someone that we clearly, sounds like, if you believe John, was going to be pick number 18 if Gray Zabel wasn't there.
So the interesting thing for me is I had Cody Alexander on, who does match quarters, and he basically spoke to the same thing Greg Bell talked about and what we've talked about here, that he believes DeAnthony Bell and Nick Emenwari will be used as linebackers in certain sub packages for Mike McDonald, very similar to what he did with Kyle Hamilton in a lot of ways, and getting them close to the football and making plays on the football. And that's where I think, again, like you said, we keep 3 initials. Maybe they find somebody through, the waiver wire that they like, or a late, John's always good at those last minute preseason trades, that they find somebody. So is there anybody on this? Now, this is where it's interesting because of that with linebacker that we just talked about. Do they keep a Tyreek Smith or another one of these D-line edge guys? Or when we go back to corner, are we keeping Nehemiah Pritchett? Are we keeping a Williams? Who are we? And apparently he's also had a good set of OTAs as well.
So if you have Pritchett, who do you have? What put us at for number wise?
That puts us at 5.
It puts us at 5 corners and 4 safeties. And
then how many
that only
spots
puts us
left?
at 22 on defense in total.
All right.
I feel like 5's the right number, but it's been brought up in the comments, and I don't think it's off base. Shaq is no lock to make this roster.
No.
I think there's an opportunity for someone like a Gene Charles to beat him out. The contract is certainly not prohibitive at all. If you cut him, you lose a couple $100,000. I think as a dead cap hit, it's not a big deal. It's not a very guaranteed contract, or maybe it was $1 million guaranteed.
I think Waxter is interesting because of what you said, Dan. He, again, is a guy that maybe they can bring on and play at safety too in a pinch if they need to. And I think he'd be a special teams ace for them.
True. I just don't think you need to worry about him getting claimed.
No, agreed.
Yeah.
So what do we want to add to this defense? Do we want to add another edge piece or D lineman? Because we're only at 22.
So we have how many spots left?
We have 3 spots left.
Does Mike Morris save his job in this scenario?
I don't think so. I think they're more likely to keep like a Bohannon or a Peely as another guy in case Jonathan Hankins struggles, or age catches up to an extent. He gets injured. You have someone else that can kind of fill his role.
That's a tough one because they didn't keep a backup. They didn't keep a second true nose tackle last year. And, Hankins was just an early down guy, and then they went other directions. They can use Jay Reed there still. I feel like, because we're trying to project, right? And this will be a whole lot easier discussion to have in about 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. I think in this scenario, I would lean towards Morris getting one of those spots, because the versatility too. Also, he can play that big defensive end. He can play that 5 technique. He can also reduce down and play on all fours inside a little bit. That makes more sense to me than keeping a guy like Bohanna or Singleton or the player that they just signed today, because those guys are so easy to get back through to the practice squad. Peely's another guy.
Whereas, does Morris immediately go to the Chargers if he gets cut?
I wouldn't.
I'm half joking, half serious though. Like, it just seems like that type of thing Harbaugh would do.
No, or the Raiders. Pete was obviously interested.
Part
of drafting him, and they've got some issues there. And Wilkins, they don't know what his situation is, and they've got some depth issues there. They're looking to add talent. So, Morris is probably a guy that gets claimed. I think if he gets released.
So we have 2 spots. So let's go back to the offense.
Is Ricky White on this roster yet?
No, and I think this is where we can get Ricky White on this roster.
Can certainly add a 6th receiver.
Yeah, So I think it's Ricky White because of special teams.
And are we at 9 offensive linemen, or do we get to 10 without Bradford?
We got to 10 offensive linemen.
Okay.
So based on this, we could keep McIntosh.
You could keep another running back and put you. So that puts you.
Do we not have MVS is off the receiver list?
No, he's there. He's right there.
No, I can't see. I'm on a smaller computer today.
And then
Ryan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Kenny Mack's got some special teams abilities as well, right? I mean, that
with these numbers,
and we all like him. So
with these numbers, I would put him in there,
right?
And then the Oots flexibility allows you to stay at 3 tight ends, I think, and you're gonna roster a couple guys on the practice squad, certainly.
Yeah.
And then with that extra spot, that might allow you to keep that 5th safety that they usually do, and we only had 4.
Well, no, because if we put Kenny Mack, we're at 53.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I like that, and I don't think you have to keep a 5th safety because I think a bunch of those other guys.
Yep.
I know I sound like a broken record, but you can get those guys through the practice squad, and so
I think you get Ty Okada through the practice squad, no problem, and then he's your call up on whatever you need during the season, kind of a deal. But that's kind of interesting that we're keeping 27 on offense currently and only 23 on defense. And I think that speaks to but what I'll say is this: I think that in some respects speaks to who you brought back, because you brought back 11 of your 12 or like 10 of your initial 11, first day starters in this defense. You have added guys that give you more flexibility, that you don't necessarily need more players in spots with the D'Anthony Bell and the Nick Emenwari being able to do certain things flexibility wise. And this is also our first roster projection, right? Like there could be massive changes, but if this is somehow how it ended up breaking down, I'm okay with this.
Yeah, I think when you look at this roster, it really becomes clear, even with some of the veterans they added this offseason, like how young this team is. When you start looking at how many of the players that we have on the roster here that are going to still be on rookie contracts, it's kind of crazy. I think in this scenario, you are going to release some players who will be snapped up by other teams. I think it's that kind of year where there's some talent that's going to be by the wayside. And then there's always a move or two that doesn't make sense to us, that we don't see coming, that surprises us. I think most of us, I know I were surprised that Drake Thomas made the roster last year, because it was only 2 weeks before the cut down that he came off the PUP list and was healthy, and we didn't get to see him really in preseason games. There's always guys like that. I could see John Ross making this roster because he's got a history with Mike McDonald and he's such a great special teams guy. There's always a surprise, but I think this is a solid group.
And guys who are asking if Robbie Oots gets hurt, who's your backup fullback? We did address that. Brady Russell probably sneaks through to your practice squad, no problem.
Yeah.
And there's your switch. I don't think anyone's clamoring for the table to get Brady Russell on their roster. So I think he's a guy that they look at where I think they probably are worried about a 5th round pick, considering the hype that Oots did get when he got drafted there, that he's a guy that you could potentially lose out on. But yeah, that's basically the roster projection, everyone.
I think it's a
That's
fun.
kinda,
I think it's a fun roster. I really.
I think it's a fun start.
And the thing I like about it too is every single position group, except for offensive line, because it's all rookies. Josh Jones is your grizzled veteran who was brought in from outside the organization. He's 27 years old. But every other position group has a nice mix of like veterans and a lot of youth. And you can start looking at like, hey, what's 2026 going to look like, 2027? Like, it's a young, anytime you can have a roster that you believe, and I do, can compete for division titles and playoff berths, and it's super young, and you're in good financial shape moving forward, like, that's a lot to look forward to. Let's start playing some damn football.
And not to
Amen.
mention that, at the quarterback spot too, if this kid, we don't want to jinx it, but if he is the future, then you got a guy under control for a couple more years too, right?
Yeah.
At the the important position, real cheap. So that's when you start loading up maybe on some vets. But yeah, I mean, I think we talked, Bryce and I talked about yesterday how this feels, like we're trending in the right direction here especially with the coaching staff. You believe in just what I think we all believe in what Mike McDonald's doing here. And I feel like he's got a clear direction too, and then the guys he's bringing in, it's almost obvious, right? From the coaching staff to some of the guys that reflect his style. So yeah, it's exciting, man. And like you said, Dan, let's just can't wait to start playing ball.
It's funny. John's over in the comments asking why so many people that are here tonight are being so negative, and I think it's a valid question.
Yeah.
We've talked quite a bit this offseason about how the national media just isn't buying into this Seahawks team this year. That they're generally picked to finish third, if not fourth, in the division, and that's crazy because we spend a lot of time talking about the minutia here and the details, and we literally just went through the roster position by position. But when you kind of zoom out and just take a general look at it, this is a team that won 10 games a year ago with a completely dysfunctional offense, tons of injuries. The defense was horrific the first 6-7 games, and yet they still found a way to win 10 games. I think the offense is going to be improved. I think the defense is going to start the season out of the gate as playing well. Bryce mentioned it. All 11 starters are back. You can make the case depending on, if you take Draymond Jones out of there and you put Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, all 11 starters, 15 players who started a game at least on defense last year. They're going to give you a chance to win from week one. And this offense, I think, is just much more smartly constructed with a vision and with a bunch of alignment and talent that at some point this year, we're going to feel a lot better about that offense. And yet people are saying they're going to win. Vegas has the most common over-under I've seen for wins is 7.5. And that the schedule's easier this year. Like, I don't quite understand.
Well, isn't that the whole Pacific Northwest, West Coast national media thing? Like, what are the headlines, right? DK out the door, Geno Smith out the door.
Yeah.
It's like when Russell Wilson was traded, the world was collapsing. What did Vegas have the Seahawks doing that year? 4 or 5 wins, right? Because it's like, point. Oh, Russell Wilson's gone? Man, like this team's going to be terrible. That to me, it's just, you're not really paying attention. You're not diving into the roster, especially Seattle, right? We're not New York. So I think that plays a significant role, especially the names, even a Tyler Lockett, even though we all know he's on the other side of his career, he's been such a name on this team nationally. So now it's Tyler, DK, Geno. This team's third at best.
And I think there's some fatigue that happens with national media, right? It's a lot to try and cover the entire league and every single 100%. Team and be like intimately, and they're so tired. Every single year they talk about, well, if they just fix the offensive line and get their running game going, this team can be really good. And they just get tired of talking about it at a certain point. And because they didn't go out and make a bunch of big name, like dramatic changes on the offensive line, it's easy for someone that doesn't cover the team on a daily basis to look at it from afar and go, I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So we'll see.
But that's why I got real quick before we get into Q&A. It's what's our expectations? I mean, Mike, I know it's early, but we just did a 53-man. I mean, where do you see this team finishing in this division?
Like what Yeah, and
NFC
I mean,
West.
I would say 11-6, and you win the division. I think the reason why I feel that way is, and I wrote about this at Field Goals. I think there's a lot of pressure, and I know I'm in the minority here, but I think there is a lot of pressure on week 1 against the 49ers. You're going to get them probably at their worst at home. I have been to the last, I think, 3 or 4 49er games in Seattle. It has not been a good time for me. And stuff. I have a lot of 49er fans in my family, and so I hear about it every year. And I just feel like that's the game where both sides are introducing a lot of new pieces. One is we chose to, whereas the Niners, they have to. And I feel like Dan pointed out, the defense should be ready to go, and they should be ready to make Brock Purdy uncomfortable. And if McCaffrey is not fully healthy and that receiving core looks like it's going to be, I expect us to stack that box and just do everything we can to make that a living hell for him for 60 minutes. And if we can control the ball and get off to a 1-0 start, I just think that it just does so much. Whereas we saw 2 years ago, Rams, this was our moment. We had just come off a playoff berth. The Rams were supposed to be kind of possibly in a rebuild. In the first half, we lost Charles Cross and Abe Lucas, and it felt like it just tanked us, right? And we got our butts kicked in that game. I am just nervous about that game, but I feel like if you win that, you set the tone. You want to start 1-0 against your division at home against a team. It would do so much for the psyche of this franchise to beat the 49ers at home in week 1. Even if we go to Pittsburgh and we lose at a home opener, and then you come back for the Saints, I just feel like starting off 2-1 is great, but 2-1 and beating the 49ers means so much. And I think that's going to happen. I think that builds off into an 11-6 season. I think there's definitely room for 12-4. I definitely think there's room for 10-7. I really do feel like this team is safe enough right now that is probably where they're parked at, barring a unforeseen injury, barring a crazy trade that we haven't seen yet. I think that's where they're at. I think the Rams benefited off of us not having our shit together on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that the Rams winning the West, getting that weird wild card game against Minnesota in a different stadium with the fire stuff, and then they get to play the Eagles in a snowstorm, which you would think the Rams would get their butts handed to, but I actually think that kind of really impacted that game in a way. And if you go back and watch that game, didn't feel like a one-score game the whole way through. It kind of felt like Eagles kind of were giving stuff away. But it created this idea that, the Rams, they're maybe the second best team in the NFC because the Lions have half their team hurt all the time. I think the Rams are in for a rude awakening, and I personally think the Niners could be really good if they get healthy. But so far, everything I'm hearing is they're not. They're just not. And so if that ends up being the case, I don't foresee Arizona doing anything this year to threaten the Seahawks. And now all of a sudden you're sitting there in January hosting a wild card game as a 3 or 4 seed, which we have not hosted a playoff game in Seattle with fans since 2016. It'll be a decade this year. I think that ends.
Crazy.
I think the Seahawks are very clearly a wild card team, but I think we're a division championship wild card caliber team, which means maybe we can win a playoff game or 2.
I'm going to throw this bold prediction out here. I think Seattle wins 2 playoff games this year.
I like it.
I think they get in, and I think they can win the wild card, especially if it's at home. And I think they could potentially have everything if the cards fall the right way. This NFC is wide open outside of the Eagles. It really is. As much as the Lions are still good with Dan Campbell, they are missing their offensive coordinator, their defensive coordinator. Those are big changes. Look at what happened to Seattle when we lost all our coordinators for that first little bit. We struggled trying to get our groove going back in different points. It's a lot. It's a lot to change a lot of those situations. There wasn't a lot of holdover, per se, from those staffs, even realistically. A lot of guys left to go follow those guys to other places, right? We all thought Tanner Angstrom was going to be the guy that followed up behind Ben Johnson, and he left and went to New York with Aaron Glenn. There's a lot of change there, and our division's kind of open for business. The NFC South, Tampa's really the only team. Everyone's saying Michael Penix in Atlanta may give them a run for their money, and Maybe Bryce Young and Carolina follow that, like there's a lot of what ifs and maybes. Well, we seem to be going in the right direction. I'm saying it's a bold prediction. My bold prediction is Seattle wins 2 playoff games. I'm not saying they go to the Super Bowl. I'm not saying they win the NFC Championship. I'm saying they're going to get into the wild card, and I think they're going to win that game, and I think they may get themselves to the NFC Championship, but I don't think they'll win it. But I think there's a good chance. My bold take is Seattle will win 2 playoff games this year.
Would certainly make us all happy. I was going to start off by saying I expect this team by the end of the year to be capable of winning in the playoffs. How many wins they have, we'll see. But I said 11-6 in my first schedule prediction. I still feel that way. I think the ceiling's higher. Certainly, if everything comes together, I think they can win this division. I do. If everything clicks, and I may immediately change that prediction and crank it up a little bit if they can win week 1. And I think with every passing day, it seems like we more and more have the advantage. I mean, I expect, especially with Ayuk being out and Pierce all banged up again, the guy's not dumb. Juwan Jennings, he understands. He's got some leverage right now. Like, they got to have somebody, right? So he'll probably be there. But you look at Seattle's defense is going to be, as I said earlier, just ready to come out of the gate at the beginning of the season and play, I think, like a top 5 defense from the get-go. But you also think about it from this perspective, right? As they prepare and they have all the benefit of knowing that they're going to face the 49ers week 1, Mike McDonald's been on the record this offseason saying that, he had to play a lot more vanilla last year than he wanted to, than he likes to. That they didn't run as many sim pressures as that he's known for. They didn't blitz as much as he'd like to. And he sounded irritated by that in one interview I saw this offseason, where he was like, no, we're going to, because of all the chemistry and continuity that we talked about earlier, like, these guys, they know this defense now. And so I think that gives them a huge advantage week 1, because as the 49ers are looking at tape, they're going to have to go back and watch Ravens tape from 2023 to really prep for this game, because I think they're going to see some things thrown at them that Seattle didn't show on tape last year.
Yeah, I got him around 11 as well, but I think it's all going to depend how they come out and set the tone. I agree with Mike. Like, I don't know. It's not a must win, but you kind of get a feeling of what this identity of this team is. If, like he said, if they just go out and make Brock Purdy's life a living hell and kind of see, okay, this defense is for real, and this is going to be an elite defense throughout the year. And then if we can just, all of a sudden that offense comes out, the line's looking decent, we can run the football, the identity's there, and starts, it's week 1, so you don't expect all cylinders firing, but you kind of get a sense of how this team is going to be possibly looking and rolling along. And I also think, man, the big thing is we got to win games at home. Like, if we want any chance of being like taking that next step, because it's been absolutely horrendous. So, that's another element, with the Niners coming in, it's absolutely no difference right now that we play them on the road or at home right now until they prove otherwise. So until we see this team coming out and having this, new identity that, hey, home field advantage is now a real thing again. That's going to be a huge determining factor. Say give it the first few games at home. Let's see what the record is, right? 3-0, 4-0, or we kind of hovering that 2-2 mark. And no matter who comes in our house, right? Because it really didn't matter. It's not like it's juggernauts, okay, tough games. It's like, no, it's the Giants. It's whoever just coming to our house and beating us. So that's I'm interested to see how we can respond now at home.
All right, Ryan, do you want to queue up some of these Q&As for a little bit here for a couple of minutes before we get out of here?
Yeah, let's do a few Q&As. Yeah, Bryce, let's see. Let's go to the starred one. I'm going to let you pull up a few. We got a few starred, pull up a few, and we'll kind of go through them as we go.
All right, so the first one we got here is a super chat from Kevin Gimbel. Do you guys each have an acquisition that you would like added to the team with our cap space via free agency or cap cut / trade? Love this knowledgeable group. Well, thank you, Kevin. I'll start with you, Mike. Who's someone, I think I know where this is going to go. Does he wear an orange and black jersey with stripes on it? 17 and a half sacks, I think, was what he got last year. Is that someone that would be on your wish list, I think, with this cap space?
Yeah, man. It's pretty crazy because right now, I really do think the Bengals are a very interesting dark horse Super Bowl pick, which is kind of crazy with all the drama going on. And that's just more of my belief in Joe Burrow and the offensive side of the ball. But like, man, with just an absolute mess that's going on with Shamar Stewart and with Trey Hendrickson, until they figure it out, I just feel like you should be calling for Trey. And I really do. And I think 35 sacks in the last 2 years. I think if you get a chance to add a blue chip edge rusher, which I do believe he is, that is someone that I would love to have. Averaged 14 and a half sacks the last 2 years. If you want to talk about big game hunting, the last two guys that haven't signed massive extensions that are negotiating right now publicly are Trey Hendrickson and Micah Parsons. And do I think both of them are going to end up with their current teams? Yes, I do. Despite everything going on in Cincinnati, I do think they understand this is their shot. If they can get everyone finally healthy and get their shit figured out in September, I do think that's a Super Bowl team. I think that's a team that is built to give Buffalo fits. It's a team built to give Kansas City fits. We've seen that in the playoffs. If they just get in, look out. And I think if they got in last year, it would have been a similar situation. So in my opinion, you have the money. You should go present an offer to Trey. And I don't think Micah is available, but if you could get Micah for a first and a third and maybe a player, would you do that? I personally would. And I also think an extension for Hendrickson and an extension for Parsons fits with what your quarterback situation looks like for the next couple of years personally. Now, the odds of either of those happening, Hendrickson is probably less than 20%. Micah Parsons is probably less than 5%, but doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking and being prepared to shoot your shot. The reason why I say that is because I think Hendrickson on this defense gives you a top 3 defense. Like right now, a top 3 defense. And with a top 3 defense, you win the division probably if your offense is average. And now you have a top 3 defense in the cold, wind, rain at Lumen Field. By that time, hopefully the fan base has gotten their shit together and gotten back to owning Lumen Field. And now that's its thing where, man, the Detroit Lions or the Washington Commanders or the Minnesota Vikings come into Seattle in January in that conditions. I love our chances as long as we're there because we've seen this every 5, 6, 7 years. You see a defense like that carry a team all the way to a conference championship or maybe even a Super Bowl. There is history behind that. And I think Hendrickson is that blue chip that could do that. And as you guys all know, I've been banging that drum for about 5 or 6 months.
Dan, what about you?
I'm on record also as saying that I think Trey Hendrickson would be a perfect addition to this defense. I think he would fit not just from a schematic standpoint or a stylistic standpoint, but he would give the defense something they don't have, like somebody that can just flat out cause headaches for opposing tackles and defensive coordinators and just based on talent alone can get to the quarterback. They don't have that right now. I think he also fits as a person, culture-wise, everything else. Like he's a Seahawk. I did just check my phone just to make sure that he hadn't been signed, hadn't agreed to a new deal in the last 2 hours, so I could let Michael off the hook. He hasn't, for the record. He's still available, although he was submitted a new contract offer yesterday by the Bengals. So we'll see if any progress can be made there. I will say this, though. I don't necessarily think I think it's a 10% chance of happening. The Bengals are notoriously difficult to deal with. They're stubborn. They don't like to trade their players. They would rather, I think, if they can't reach agreement with him by week 1, rather than trade him, they'll just let it go into the season.
Yeah, let him rot, basically.
Yeah, essentially, call him at his bluff. They do that all the time. They're doing it with their first round pick right now, and it's ridiculous. I think it's much more likely that a guy like Jadeveon Clowney is added at some point, especially if they have any indication that it's going to take Uchenna Nwosu a little bit longer to come back from this knee cleanup that he had this offseason than they were hoping for. I think it's telling that he's still sitting out there. And I think he's probably a guy that they have on speed dial if they have any questions about that position group. I would say, to answer the question, though, from my perspective, that as far as an acquisition goes. I think I like the roster the way it sits right now. Unless you can get a guy like Hendrickson at the cut to 53 when there's all those players available, it's essentially a new wave of free agency. 1,200 players instantly become available. I would like to see them snap up another interior defensive tackle that can play some nose and take some pressure off Hankinson, and maybe even a younger guy that has some upside that can be part of this thing moving forward. I still feel like they need another guy in there that can play some nose, move around a little bit, be versatile, play some 5 technique also. They have a long history of doing that, picking guys up late in the process at that position. Tony McDaniel, Al Woods. There's a bunch of guys they pick up late in camp that end up being big contributors. And I think that's still kind of the sore thumb right now on the roster.
I'm just going to say this for mine, and Ryan, I'll let you get to yours. I understand the appeal of Hendrickson because of the disgruntledness of, Cincinnati and stuff. I'll be honest, for me, though, the one thing I've learned about John is John will swing for the fences. And you talked about the Jamal Adams trade. That wasn't an aging player. Trey Hendrickson is an aging player. I think there would be more sense for Seattle, and I know it may cost more and all that, to go after a Micah Parsons because of the Durde connection, the DeMarcus Lawrence connection now, which, as we remember when we got Dwayne Brown and he went and spoke to Jadeveon Clowney about Clowney and trying to get that all worked out when there was some disgruntledness there. I could see that being more of a play because you are getting a younger asset that you can keep around for a longer period of time. And yes, you may have to give up a Reek Woolen and a first and a third to go get a guy like a Micah Parsons, but I could see that being more potentially of the play of Seattle than going for the 31-year-old that could potentially, have a downhill spiral quicker than, say, Micah Parsons. And I'll just say Jerry Jones went out today and made a dumb public comment and threw Parsons and Dak Prescott under the bus. And if you watch Brian Schottenheimer's face, it was kind of that of, did that really just happen as I am now the head coach of what could turn into a massive dumpster fire here in Dallas?
And, we started this show talking about the Noah Fant move. Maybe one of the reasons they were willing to let him go and just add a little bit more to the coffers, right? They have, I think, according to OTC and accounting for contingencies and things like that, they have about 28. Curtis Allen this morning said they have about $28 million in effective cap space. Maybe part of that motivation was like, hey, just in case, right? Just in case Micah Parsons really, truly does become available sometime now between now and the trade deadline. I will just say one more thing about Trey Hendrickson, because Bryce, you mentioned his age, right? And that might diminish the chances of him being acquired, right? We hear John Schneider talk about Ron Wolf all the time and about the influence he had on him and about how much he learned coming up through the Green Bay front office with Ron Wolf as the GM, legendary GM. He was on that staff when they acquired Reggie White. Any guesses as to how old Reggie White was when he joined the Green Bay Packers?
31.
He was 31 years old. I'm just saying.
Hey, okay, question. All right, let's just take this moment for this world that Micah Parsons, let's say stuff goes south. A first, a third, and Boye Mafe. Do you say yes to that deal? And
100%.
let's just say the Karlaftis deal is there for Mafe, and Mafe says, "I'll take that deal to stay in Seattle." So, like, you can have Mafe at that price, and do you think Dallas would accept that deal? And do you think Seattle would accept that deal? A first, a third, and Boye Mafe. And you got to pay Micah Parsons $42 million a year.
Right now, today, I don't think they do that deal. Maybe at the deadline they do. Dallas, I mean. I think right now,
that would be offered.
If they truly, truly thought that Parsons was someone that they were willing to part with, I think the bidding starts at 2 first-round picks, even though he's in the expiring year of his contract. Like, I don't know. That's a tough one. And I would do, if they called today and said, we'll give you Micah Parsons for a first, a third, and Boye Mafe, I would do that. Because I'll tell you, the other part of your question, I am not giving Boye Mafe that Karlaftis deal.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not.
No.
All right, let's get this going, guys. We'll do a couple more minutes.
Get a couple
Go
more.
ahead, Ryan.
Wait,
that's
I
me.
guess Suns. Well, I guess he's saying way too bold of a prediction. But we'll be better than the Niners
That's the
this year.
point of it.
Robert Saleh is cooked. Robert Saleh back in San Francisco. Sun 1Z doesn't believe in Saleh. What do you guys think? Is he cooked, or is he going to get that defense rolling again down there?
I think it's a massive addition, to be honest, me personally. And I think if the Niners are healthy, I think that is a team that I would not be stunned if you told me it all worked itself out and we see them playing the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl. However, it just feels like there's a lot that has not looked good so far. And it's a lot to ask Saleh, and that defensive line is going to be really young. And if Nick Bosa is not healthy, I just feel like my faith in the Niners has continued to go down as the summer has gone on. Just, man, have you guys seen Kyle? Like, he looks like he's aged like 15 years. Like, it just feels like a breakup is coming, maybe. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, maybe they can do a soft reboot like what the Bills did last year or what the Vikings are doing. Man, this could also just, or the Rams. This could just be a massive train wreck that might cost John Lynch's job.
I just want to see us crush Brock Purdy week 1. Just put him on his back. The two teams you just mentioned have Josh Allen and Matthew Stafford. So I do not put Brock Purdy anywhere near that group. So I'm not a Purdy believer. I've never been. I know he gets, people like him, and I'm not saying he's a terrible quarterback, but I just, the whole Avengers thing, like one of the best lineups that he had going from early on, right? Like you said, Mike, that is slowly going away, right? Yeah. And so, now he has to show that he's worth that contract. I don't see it. So that's the other thing. Saleh aside, you look at that offense, and so I want to see us just come out and just get Purdy on his back and turning the ball over. And man, how fun would that be?
I have a tremendous amount of respect for Robert Saleh, but I cannot believe just how much everyone is deferring to that hire and proclaiming that the 49ers defense is going to rise back to prominence. I mean, you're talking, they lost their best corner in Charvarius Ward. They lost Dre Greenlaw. They lost Talanoa Hufanga. They allowed their entire defensive line, not named Nick Bosa, to walk out the door, or they showed him the door this offseason. And young defensive linemen take as long to develop as any position group in the league. We see this year and year. I think they're counting on him just making something out of this group. And I don't think it's a very good group. You have a future Hall of Famer in Fred Warner at inside linebacker. You have probably a future Hall of Famer if he continues to stay healthy in Nick Bosa. The rest of that defense are all major, major question marks. Even their two young safeties, Malik Mustafa and Jair Brown, are two guys that I like, but the 49er fans and analysts would have you thinking that they're going to be future Hall of Famers too. Those are guys that got drafted below where they were expected to because they don't have great athletic profiles. I just think there's so much work to it. I think that defense is going to be mediocre at best. I really do. And then Robert Saleh is going to leave after 1 year and get a head coaching job, so it's not really going to matter. But I just think that too much deference. I think too much deference. Yeah, I was shocked he didn't get hired last offseason, honestly. Yeah. I think teams are going to be willing to give him a pass on what happened in New York just because it was so dysfunctional in so many other ways.
Like it
unless it's a complete train wreck in San Francisco this year. Complete train wreck in a way that can excuse him, right? Like Warner gets hurt. If Warner and Bosa get hurt, they miss.
Right.
I think he's probably one of the leading candidates for any opening next year.
You know where I think he could end up as just a caveat to that, and then we'll get into some more of these so we can get through them because we're only going to go for about 5-10 minutes more, guys. What happens if they do well and the Colts falter? I think Robert Saleh could go to Indianapolis.
I can see that.
Because that's the one thing the Colts have never had is a good defensive-minded guy. Yeah. It's always been offensive-led. Change it up. Go. Last time they had a great defensive mind was Tony Dungy. And what did they do? They won a Super Bowl. So what if the Irsay family, now that obviously the passing of Jim, now you go back to something that worked for you in the past, right? There's a potential there that I could see that. And it's not a massive market like in New York. It's a smaller market. Might be an opportunity. But so John McGrath here. We got the gang together. John, you've been in the comments all night. Appreciate it. I'd be rather flying an X-Wing. Seattle's best lineup tonight. Thank you. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Appreciate it. And we got this one here from John. He goes, Mike McDonald doesn't play. He proved that last season with the linebackers. Pete let players slide too much to make them happy. That ain't happening anymore. And that's true. I don't think, to our point about DK this offseason, there was no back and forth. There was no, if you don't want to be here, we will move on without you. We're not going to play this game anymore. I think it's a better overall setup. John also comes back with Nwosu will be the next guy released if he can't stay healthy. I think that's fair. I think it truly is fair with Nwosu.
This is definitely his last shot. I mean, we all hope he's healthy. 100%. But you can't keep running that back. But
nope.
Yeah, just like that, it's kind of a couple more here.
And our friend Brandon was in here, Hawk's Nest, who me and Dan will talk about our thing at the end here about what we got going on August 1st down in Seattle, which will be kind of a cool thing. Here's one more from Ethan Mayer. He goes, Ricky White could be a Pro Bowler as a special teamer. He has as many punt blocks as an entire teams last year.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Ricky White's special teams versatility. I think he blocked 4 punts last year or something on his own. That's a huge part. And the special teams unit last year really struggled. This is Jay Harbaugh's get right season with that group now. They have to make that work. And we'll just see. We got Jonas in here from Germany for using his Seahawker roster builder there from the German Seahawkers.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being up that late over there, Jonas. I appreciate that. That's great.
or
early. He's up early.
Yeah,
he's
up early. Yeah, and sorry,
we're up late. We're up late. It's probably 8 a.m. over there.
And Bro Dude goes, mark my words, Martinez will be the featured running back by the end of the year. That's potentially, who knows?
Yeah, man. I mean, we're all high on this kid. Who knows? Yeah. Also injuries, right? That's shit. You might have to.
I got 2 more here, and we'll call it. Setting the Edge comes in with a bold take. Seattle goes 5-1 versus the NFC West, scoring 22 points plus per game and holding opponents to 19 or less. That's a pretty bold take on those specifics. And then we got Pops P here's take. Donald has a better season than Geno stats-wise than he did in 2024.
Sure.
Interesting. I will say this, and I meant to say this earlier when we were talking about Darnold. I think it's remarkable to me this offseason how the narrative about him has changed, and we see all these quarterback rankings come out, and he's in the 25 range, whereas, he got MVP votes last year. He was the darling of the league halfway through the season. But the narrative this offseason that because those last 2 games didn't go very well, that's the real that's Sam Darnold really showed his true colors, and that's who he is, not the guy that played in 16 games before that. If you go back and watch those games and you're going to put all of that on Sam Darnold, you don't know the game. That offense, particularly in the playoff game against the Rams, but to some extent also against the Lions, just a complete dominant performance by the opposing defense, and it was a total offensive failure. They couldn't protect Darnold on the interior. There's a reason they let their center and both guards go this offseason and changed that entire interior out in Minnesota. He didn't have any time to throw. He was under duress the entire game. They couldn't run the football, and their defense played poorly in that game as well. And it was similar in the Lions game. Were they his best performances? No. But to put all the blame on him for those 2 performances and try to make a judgment on what kind of quarterback he is based on that without, looking at the first 16 games, you have to balance all that out. So I think there's a good chance. Bryce, you said earlier today, because you think the volume won't be there, that you don't think his stats will be the same as last year. I've actually predicted and will continue. I think they're going to be similar. I think he's going to throw over 30 touchdown passes and have a good season, because I do think, for some of the same reasons that you do, I think that offense is going to be more balanced, more under center, more play action. We're going to run the football better. I think there's going to be opportunities for explosives. And you and I, over on the Patreon, the Seahawks Forever Patreon, broke down all of Sam Darnold's red zone touchdowns, of which he threw 26 last year. And what did we see? Operating within structure, decisive, getting the ball out quickly, not holding it too long. He was really good in the red zone last year, and I expect that to continue.
So my one caveat on why I don't think he reaches 30 is because I believe some of those red zone opportunities that he had last year are going to be going to Jalen Milroe, and that packaging that they will do with Jalen Milroe within the 15 to 10 yard line. You will see, I think, more of Jalen Milroe than we expect necessarily, especially if there's success with it, with them going with a variation package for him, where we may see Jalen rush for 7 touchdowns and pass for 4. And I think that will cut in those 11 touchdowns will cut into that total for Sam. And I think 28 is the sweet spot for Sam. 27, 28 touchdown passes and probably anywhere between 8 to 12 interceptions and 34 to 3,200 yards. Because I think Seattle will have another 1,000-yard rusher. I don't know who it is, but I think they will have a 1,000-yard rusher in that backfield with this offense going forward. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right.
Nice. All right. That was a good one. Long one. Before we get out of here, Bryce, you guys got a couple of announcements.
Yeah, so myself, Dan Viens, Brandon Kane, who from the Hawk Nest was in the comments there for a bit, Mookie Alexander, and a special guest will be doing I guess you want to call it, Dan, a meet and greet live roundtable show following one of the Seahawks practices on August 1st.
Yeah, it'll be a camp check-in, camp preview, live crossover roundtable, whatever. We'll use all the buzzwords, all of those. But we're still working on location. I'm going to have a meeting later this week with a local brewery and talk about some sponsorship possibilities. And they've hosted podcasts in the past. So I got a couple possibilities. We'll announce that as early as possible because it'd be great to have as many of you out there as we can. That'll be a lot of fun. I just have to figure out how to, we'll have to talk about the logistics of it because my mixer can fit 4 microphones and we're talking about 5 guys. So we might have to alternate or we'll figure that out, but we'll
figure it out.
We'll make it happen and we'll announce that as soon as we have details.
Just snuggle up and 2 guys to a mic. Right.
Like what's the NPR sketch on SNL, the sweaty ball with the 2, and they're always like leaning in on the same mic.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it'll work out. But
right.
hey guys, awesome episode. Everybody in the comments, this was fun because a lot of interaction tonight. We're about to play some football, guys. So let's get pumped up because man, next thing you know, it's preseason and then we're ready for the real deal. So yeah, it's I can't wait, like you guys as well. So that's it. Great episode, guys. That's it for us tonight. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Hawks.